Good afternoon. It is Thursday, March 5th. It's 1:30, and we are the Education and Culture Committee. I'm Will Jawanda, the chair, joined by Councilmember Trevor Evans and Councilmember Kristen Mink to discuss three important items. First, we have our CIP discussion of the libraries. We're really happy to have the library team and DGS here. And we welcome both directors, Director Graham and Director Dice, and teams. Councilmember Mink is the lead for libraries now, but I used to be the lead for libraries, and I love our libraries. I brag about them all the time. And when I first got elected, I visited all 21 libraries, including in the correctional facility, and held like town halls there. And they're just. It's a great way to see the county. It's one of the things that I think people love about our county. The library refresh that DGS has done, I know we'll talk about today, has really been a great model. And when we reopen those things, it's like Christmas, come early, or whatever, Hanukkah, whatever Ramadan, whatever Eid, whatever you celebrate, it's like that, because people are Lunar New Year. It's exciting when people are there. So, and thankfully we just have like a lot of good updates today. So we're not cutting anything, no recommended reductions, at least not today. So we're looking forward to the discussion. Second, we'll receive a class size update from MCPS, which I'm excited to talk about because we have our new staffing standards that are in place. And then third, we will talk about academic performance. But first, let's start with the CIP for libraries. So I'll turn it over, unless the lead for libraries wants to say anything this time. Mr. Ambider.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The county executive recommends a total of $83 million in the 6-year CIP for libraries, which represents an increase of $8.2 million or 10.9% from the amended total 6-year cost, which was $74.8 million. The cost increase results primarily from a new cost estimate for the Clarksburg Library, as well as an addition of a project to design and construct a new library at Shady Grove West. The MCP overall comprises 7 items, 2 new libraries, as mentioned, 2 standalone renovation projects, 2 level of effort, and then 1 completed project with some reconciliation on the appropriations. Overall, at the top, I'll say council staff recommends approval of each project as recommended by the executive. And I can go ahead into the first project.
Yes, unless there's any comments from either of the directors. Do you just want to go into the projects? Okay, great. Let's go into, and we'll pause as folks have questions on each project. So let's start.
Thank you. The first project at the top of page 2 of your staff report is the Clarksburg Library, which provides for the design and construction of a new library in Clarksburg. The executive recommends an increase of $5.3 million over 6 years, which is an 18.4% increase from the amended CIP last year. This stems from additional site work, including parking, extending Clarks Ridge Road, additional DOT requirements for Stringtown Road, and some design delays due to changes recommended by the Historic Preservation Commission. The recommended total project cost is $40.3 million, which is an increase of roughly $6.7 million from the amended CIP. For construction timeline, construction is scheduled to begin in summer 2027 with completion scheduled for spring 2029. I'll just note briefly the design process, as mentioned, has been mildly impacted by an extended review at the Historic Preservation Commission, HPC. However, at this point, at its most recent review in February, the HPC recommended that the project advance to the next stage of the review process. Some of the HPC's concerns include the inclusion of the historic day house, which is on the site, in the redevelopment scheme, and consequently the county plans to explore means of incorporating that day house into both the site design as well as the library programming, and that's reflected in the project description form. Council staff recommends approval of this project as recommended by the executive.
Thank you. One question on this. Obviously, every time I'm in Clarksburg, people want to know when this is going to be built, so I appreciate the transparency on the timeline. So we're looking like 3 years from now for an open. Do we believe that's firm? And I know obviously things can happen, but does that feel like we can be pretty certain?
Sure. David Dice, Director, Department of General Services. Yes, I think this is a pretty firm schedule. As council staff mentioned, the issue that's really been delaying the project to this point is getting HPC approval. We've gone back and forth with a number of different designs. The final design that everyone's agreed upon has what my staff says more rustic elements to it, as well as actually we had always intended to do something with the house, but now HPC's requested to envelop that more. We've talked with libraries; it'll be part of libraries programming and the like. But so yes, we are prepared to move forward with this with an anticipated opening in March of '29.
Okay, any questions from anybody on that? Dr. Graham, Director Graham, anything you want to add? Okay, great. Well, without objection, we'll approve the county executive's recommendation.
The next project at the top of page 3 of your packet is to provide for design and build out of a new library in the Shady Grove West community across from the metro station. HOC, the Housing Opportunities Commission, will own the housing development that provides the space for this library, which will be leased via long-term lease by the county. The executive recommends $5.7 million over 6 years for this project, which is new to the CIP this year. Design is scheduled to begin in summer 2026, followed by the start of construction in fall 2027, and project completion in fall 2028. The PDF for this project notes that the library will provide unique and community-tailored programs, and DGS and MCPL staff noted that this could include modular spaces that could be adapted to different types of programs depending on the audience and depending on the time of day. Council staff will note as well, the council received several letters from community members expressing support for this project, and staff recommends approval of this project on the merits. Staff will also note as a new project, there is a broader affordability gap in the overall CIP, but recommends approval of this project as recommended by the executive.
Thank you. Yes. Director Graham, anything, or Director Dice, anything you want to add on this
I'll
one?
hand it off to you.
Yeah, just
As a point of reference, if you're familiar with the Maggie Nightingale Library in Poolesville, it's about that same size. So it's a size point of reference. The multi-use building, the residential building with ground level retail is under contract. It'll be an HOC building, and we'll be leasing that space from them. It's a great location. I meet regularly with the Shady Grove community on a number of different projects. Yeah, to say that they're enthusiastic about this would be an understatement. But I'm going to brag on my colleague to my left. I think the person who's more enthusiastic about how this space can be used is the library's director. When she first came to the county and I mentioned this as a new project for her, she really got excited about how they might be able to program it. So I'm going to shut up and let her talk.
appreciate that. Yeah, I think it deserves some discussion. It's a new item in an important area, kind of a pocket library.
I'm excited. Director Graham for Montgomery County Public Libraries, and thank you. We're really excited. The team and I just took a visit up to Baltimore to look at the library that I did up there, Johnston Square, which was the first of its kind in Maryland, which is a mixed-use space with affordable housing over top. And this is a great opportunity for Montgomery County. We're really looking forward to providing stellar, exceptional customer service with a lot of different amenities and really making this branch a destination for the county. We have many traditional libraries. This will be a more innovative space. We hope that will draw from around the county teens and the young at heart alike.
I can't. And that one, I think if I read it right, that was 28 opening. Yeah.
That's the plan, yes.
Great. Yeah.
It's wholly dependent on the progress of construction
Of course,
the
yeah.
multi-use building above
But
it.
that's that's the goal. Yeah. Great. Any questions on that? Yeah, Councilmember May.
I know that bringing libraries that have these types of adaptable, flexible spaces is something that you had talked about when you came on board and that all of us have been excited about. So it is exciting to see this come to fruition. I'm just going to speak it into being. Could you just talk a little bit about some of the uses of that space that will be possible with this type of design that are more difficult, more challenging in our current designs?
Yeah, I think having a more flexible space, modular furniture will allow us to adapt the services depending on how our community uses it, what time of day our community uses it in such a small space, we're going to need that flexibility to move furniture around and also adapt to programming collections. But I will let my manager of digital transformation talk a little bit about the innovative stuff we're going to have there.
Hi, Maddie Shellhart. I'm the Digital Transformation Manager for MCPL. We are looking at putting cutting edge technology into this space, high speed, Wi-Fi, broadband, et cetera. We're also looking at doing laptop carts so that people aren't tied down to a desk. In addition to that, we're building out innovation technology kits for programming that can be moved throughout the whole system so they don't necessarily have to be stored on site to make space. So for example, something that I just recently purchased are Meta Oculus glasses for programming. We're going to be piloting those at a similar size branch and then thinking about pushing them over to Shady Grove for programming there. So everything mobile, everything moving, everything able to be put away and transferred.
Very cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Evans.
Sure. So thank you. It's really good to hear about the new and exciting things that we're trying to do with libraries. What I'm trying to do as a new council member is hold listening sessions. And so while this won't be exactly in the area that I just visited in Montgomery Village and Gaithersburg, what I did hear from the community is that they want more community spaces where our young students can go, as well as just people that live in the community can go. And I think what is really most important is for people to really get into the habit of having the library be provided as like a hub where you can come and get a wealth of information and resources. So that's another thing that I heard the community say, is that we are not aware of all the resources that are out there and available to us. And so in visiting that particular library, it was the Gaithersburg Library, there were different grounders with information. So anything that we could do to continue to put more information out there for the community to know what's provided to them as residents will be helpful. So just looking forward to all the exciting things that are going to happen. And this is my first time meeting you. So welcome, and thank you for your work that you've done in Baltimore that you're bringing to Montgomery County. Yes.
Councilmember Mike.
Thanks. I remember just a couple of things that I've seen in some other libraries that I'd wanted to mention. One of them is accommodations for a parent who might, or a caregiver, who might be there with their little one and want a way to kind of keep them contained or nearby as they themselves do some work on a computer or do some reading. And I wonder if there might be, or if there already are considerations for ways to accommodate that kind of setup, but I thought that was very cool. And then the other one is, and I don't know that this necessarily makes sense as we think about the modular piece, but having some kind of creator space to do, for folks who are using their phones, there's audio visual things happening, and that obviously is something that is taking off really at many ages now, but especially for the young folks. And if there is a way to, market any of the spaces in a library as being a good fit for them to come do that, then I could certainly see that as a draw as well.
Thank you. I think you're talking about the parent and child corrals, where the parent can work on the computer and there's a built-in space. Yes. For the play area for the child while the parent is working. And we're looking at that. We have a lot of space limitations at Shady Grove, but we're looking at that as a particular element in some of our existing branches already.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Last thing I'll say, and this could apply to Clarksburg too, and other libraries, and we have our MCPS colleagues here, to the extent that when you said teens and innovative, there's always a draw. And I've always been wanting to see more coordination with the school system of using the library space in an intentional way for certain groups of students, particularly teens. I know there's some that already happens, but as we're thinking about building new ones, we're forming those relationships early, and I'm talking to MCPS too, as far as just like thinking about in the planning of it. So we when you open up, you can have like whatever schools are in the catchment, there could be some intentional programming. You could figure out transportation. I don't know if any of that is happening now, but it's just something that, as you said that, I know it's always a struggle. I'm channeling all the teen people that I meet at the libraries. They're like, we want them to be here, but we got to get them in the door, and that's always a struggle,
I will offer that when we do this project, when we did Wheaton and other projects, we meet with the community in advance and get input. And I know in particular this one, when there's some general layouts, the architects come in and they think, well, we'll do this, this, this. And then the public comes in and goes, oh, no. And so, which is great. That's what we want. It's not the architect's building. It's not my building. It's the people's building. Yeah. And so we got a lot of input from teens in that respect. So there is that awareness, but I do think, and I won't speak for libraries, but I think it's a great idea to include schools' input on some of this too.
Yeah, I think you'd be happy to hear. We just started working with the school in Quince Orchard because we have a significant number of teens coming into that space throughout the day and working with them to redesign our spaces, getting feedback from our community on what they would like to see those spaces and recognizing that it becomes a teen library after 2:30. It's about 5 and like the demand for the space and how they use the space, their needs for non-traditional furniture, technology. So we're already working on that and hopefully that will influence our new building projects as well.
Awesome. Great to hear. Mr. Ambiner, let's go. Without objection, we'll approve the new Shady Grove West libraries, and obviously dependent on the whole CIP mix, but we think it's a great project. Yeah. Next one.
Thank you. Moving on to the 2 renovation projects. The next one is the Chevy Chase Library and Redevelopment Project, which provides for the renovation of the Chevy Chase Library. The executive recommends $5.8 million over 6 years for this project, which is unchanged from the approved FY25 to 30 CIP. The cost for this project is comparable to the placeholder cost of $5.6 million per library that's in the library refurbishment level of effort project. Based on this level of funding, DGS expects that the scope of the work completed for this branch will be comparable to other refurbishments, which may not be fully inclusive of the library's full range of renovation needs. As discussed during the review of the previous approved FY25 to 30 CIP in spring 2024, the project was originally conceived of as a teardown and redevelopment with associated new housing development, but has since changed to this renovation with no plans to adjust the footprint of the library, although opportunities remain for infill residential development. Council staff recommends approval as recommended by the executive.
Well, I know having been involved in this one for a while, I know the community is probably happy about this, or many are happy, but there's still the potential for infill development. It would just be obviously smaller scale than I think.
Yes, that's correct. Townhome development. We've got some options we've looked at. We've spoken to other developers, of course, over the storied past of this particular site, and so certainly that can come later. But the library is in desperate need of refurbishment, and what it needs, but in the way of capital improvements overall, is not going to be fully funded by this. We are, in fact, point of fact, we are there on site right now, refurbishing the elevator for Chevy Chase Library at the tune of about $500,000. So we'll do what needs to be done. That is related to the building envelope and major elements of the building. The refurbishment will do the bulk of that, but we're prepared to follow with other level of effort projects to complete what needs to be done over time.
Appreciate that. Any comments on this one? Okay, so without objection, we'll concur.
The next project is for the rehabilitation and renovation of the Noyes Library for Young Children, which includes changes to make the building compliant with ADA requirements. The executive recommends $1.39 million over 6 years for this project, which is a decrease of $5.23 million from the 6-year figure in the amended CIP. That total project cost remains the same, so the decrease is just due to the project cost moving through the 6-year period. Design has been completed and construction is expected to begin this spring. Council staff recommends approval as recommended by the executive.
Another long time project here, I know the community is super excited. I was in Kensington the other night that this is moving forward, but go ahead, Dr.
Well, I know that there's been some dates thrown out amongst the Kensington community, so I think for the record in this forum, it'd be appropriate to
what's really happening.
Right set everyone's expectations.
Sure.
Sometimes I feel like my role here is the official wet blanket of the county, but I'd like to be more realistic. The contract with the contractor we expect it to be fully executed and processed by the Office of Procurement next week. Contractor then has between 60 and 75 days to mobilize. Don't anticipate it being a long mobilization period. It's not that big a project. I don't want to have a groundbreaking just to have a groundbreaking and then have the site sit idle for 6 to 8 weeks. So we'd much rather plan a groundbreaking, not only in better weather, because I'm still paranoid about snow, but do it closer to when the actual work will begin. So I'm expecting in the period between late May and June at this point, just so everybody knows.
Appreciate that. Please invite the committee. We
You bet.
love to be there.
Without
And
a doubt.
we'll bring some kids in tow. Any questions on this one? Okay. Without objection.
The next project is the first of the 2 level of effort projects, which is the 21st Century Library Enhancements level of effort, intended to keep technology current in existing libraries by updating technology and related support systems. The executive recommends a decrease of $37,000 per year to accommodate a shift of funds from this project to the library's operating budget. And as a level of effort project, costs are expected to continue indefinitely, even though nothing is included in the beyond 6 years cost. Council staff recommends approval as recommended by the executive.
Library refurbishment. Anything anyone wants to add on that? I'm sorry, this was 21st.
This was 21st Century.
21st Century Library refurbishment. I'm going ahead. 21st Century seems pretty straightforward. Slight decrease without objection.
And then next is the library refurbishment level of effort project, which provides for the modernization of all 21 branches over time. The executive recommends an increase of $2.73 million over 6 years, or 9.3% from the amended FY25 to 30 CIP. The cost increase reflects the institution of a placeholder cost of $5.6 million per library for out-year refurbishments in the 6-year period. Currently, refurbishment is ongoing at the Damascus branch, and completion is expected in fall 2026, followed by reopening also in the fall. The next libraries scheduled in this project are Charles E. McGee Library, with construction slated to begin in FY27, followed by Twinbrook, Rockville, Gaithersburg, and Olney. And again, as a level of effort project, costs are projected to continue indefinitely, and council staff recommends approval.
Thank you. As I said, I think might be my favorite program in county government. If I had to pick one, and community loves it. So the next 2, just to be clear, the next opening will be Damascus in November of this year.
Right, we are renovating Damascus Senior Center and Library, since they share the same roof basically together. And that work there, I was just looking, is approximately 70% complete. So we're on track, on schedule. I meet regularly with my capital improvement staff, and this is the one as soon as I introduce it, they say, no problems, on schedule. So 70% complete as of now. We're still looking at an opening probably in November.
Great. That sounds good. Just in time for the election.
After which we will then begin work on McGee.
Yes. And what do you anticipate? I know that one, it gets a lot of heavy use. What's that would strike me as one that might need a little more TLC, but what do you think? Do you think that will be on the same timeline?
Yeah, it's about a year-long project.
Okay.
Obviously the beautiful building. It's a crown jewel as far as architecture is concerned, but it also has some challenges. And it is a heavily loved building. So even though people don't think the building's that old, it's actually older than you think, and it needs a fair amount of work. So, but we expect the project to last about a year.
Great. Any questions? All right. Without objection, we'll approve the refurbishment level of effort.
And then finally, at the top of page 6 of your packet is the Wheaton Library and Community Recreation Center remaining in the CIP. The project provided for a new library in Wheaton that opened in 2019. This is just here because the executive recommends a disappropriation of $388,000 to bring the total appropriation in line with project expenditures. Of that total, $388,000, $341,000 in current revenue will be released to the general fund, and $47,000 will be available in GO bonds for other capital projects. Council staff recommends approval.
Sounds good. We're glad to have money come back. So without objection. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll see you for the operating side, libraries. And Director Tice, I'm sure we'll see you for something. Next item, we're going to move to MCPS, class size update and proposed new staffing standards. So, Ms. Hall, it's good to see you as well. So I invite our MCPS colleagues down. So I see we have Ms. Alfonso Windsor and Mr. Francois. Good to see you both. How are you? Good to see you.
Hi, good
Yeah.
afternoon.
You want to tee us up here?
Absolutely. I apologize. I
Ms.
believe
Cummings?
Mr. Proudy will be back shortly.
No problem.
But I can definitely guess Rolly.
You're well prepared, I know.
Apologies.
There he is.
Oh,
I moved too efficiently for you, Doug. Sorry. That's all right.
Okay, today's presentation on class size. The packet features data from pages 3 to 9, looking at class size by level, and to summarize, elementary class size is down slightly over the past 2 years. The number of oversized classes are smaller, as opposed to middle and high school, where class sizes are up slightly again, and the number of above guideline classes are up for both of those levels. MCPS's presentation will provide you more detail about the proposed new staffing standards. They will go through that in terms of proposal, the reasons why, and all the tiers that they're going to propose as part of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for hustling down, too. I'll turn it over to our MCPS team. Ms. Alfonso Windsor.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you for having us there, to talk about this topic, which has been the new staffing standards have been something that we have been discussing, with our board and with our, staff, over the last month. So really MCPS is in a transition period, in terms of our enrollment, in terms of, the students that our farms rate is going down. So we are in a stage of transition, and it is an opportunity for MCPS to really look at how we're staffing our schools, make sure that it's equitable, make sure that it's aligning with the blueprint requirements to ensure that the funding is following the students. And we really want to make sure that we're right sizing, that we're providing the schools with the staff that they need, and that staff might be different from what they needed, 20 years ago when we first developed, the staffing guidelines that we're currently using. So we want to make sure that we are staffing them appropriately, that we're right sizing, that we don't have classes that are understaffed, try to avoid as much as possible, or that are overstaffed. So that is the purpose of the staffing standards. As Mr. Proudy mentioned, we do have some some classes this year that is under enrolled. And we're trying to address that as well as the over enrolled. So again, just right sizing and taking advantage of this transition period where the decrease in enrollment and the continued projection of a decrease in enrollment could help us through that process. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Francois. He is the Deputy Chief of Finance and has been leading this work and with the work groups in terms of staffing standards to walk us through what we're proposing.
Just hit your mic there there you go.
As you notice, this is my first time before
Welcome.
you. So Alan Francois, Deputy Chief of Financial
I'm
Oversight.
proud of myself for pronouncing your name right.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome to the committee.
Okay, so in terms of slides, can we go to the goals of the Staffing Standards Project? Okay, great. So as to not take a lot of time, I'm just going to read off what some of the goals are that we've identified for this project that are aligned to some of the opening comments that Ms. Alfonso Windsor made. So consistency and transparency, that's what we're striving for. We want to make sure that schools and school communities understand how we are allocating resources to schools. Financial stability and predictability, that's important for families to understand and expect certain resources at schools. Differentiation to meet student need, that speaks to our equity component. Targeted support to increase academic achievement, again, addressing equity. Staffing ratios that balance workload. We know it's important for teachers to have manageable classrooms. And then data-based decisions to improve equity. Want to make sure that we're not making one-off decisions based on the loudest voices, but that we're using data to make those decisions. And then we want to be competitive. We want to make sure that we are competitive with our neighboring school districts. On this slide here, this is the why. And why now? So, and our superintendent has made this loud and clear that, financial irresponsibility has been in play, and so we want to have position control to make sure that we are having financial control over our budget and over our resources. We do have a strategic plan to stabilize and reduce class size. This is part of a 5-year effort. Our approach to staffing has not been updated in many years, and we've had a changing county as it relates to our student enrollment. We have staffing guidelines. Those are loose, and so what we're trying to implement are staffing standards. And so our standards, as you'll see in some of the presentation, they're very clear as to what data we're using and how we're making those decisions. So again, this is standards versus guidelines, and this is going to address some of that transparency and equity and adequacy in our system. And we need to build a model that can be adjusted annually. So if you've seen the staffing standard and implementation plan, it says working draft, and that's because we are listening to a lot of different stakeholders. We're doing that now this spring. We did it over the winter, but we'll continue this during the implementation of these staffing standards. So on the next several slides, I'm going to cover a few high-level topics. So first, I want to give you a sense of what some of the key inputs and influencing factors were that we used to develop the staffing standards. And then second, we'll review classroom staffing ratio information and proposed staffing standards for classrooms at all school levels. And third, I'll review for you the proposed changes to special education and English language development. And then finally, I'll close out with our implementation plan, which is over several years. So on the slide that's up, the primary influencing inputs and factors that were utilized to develop the proposed staffing standards are our FARMS data, school size, and class size information. So again, FARMS is free and reduced price meals, right? We believe that the most concrete predictor of academic performance is correlated to FARMS. National studies have found significant achievement gaps between children from different socioeconomic backgrounds before they even start kindergarten, with low-income and minority children lagging in reading and math skills. So one example of this research was done by David Burkham and Valerie Lee. So our response to this is having a tiered system of staffing support based on FARMS rate, designed to differentiate additional support where we need it most. The second influencing factor, school size and enrollment. So enrollment is a bedrock input in staffing for any school district and can impact service delivery if not managed properly. Our response to this one is differentiated additional staffing support for larger schools and schools with larger target populations. And then finally on this slide, class size and workload for teachers. The impact of workload on teachers impact academic performance. And so the response here is reduced and differentiated staffing ratios better account for workload considerations to promote stability. You've heard me mention FARMS and some of the tiering. So having a tiered system for determining staffing support based on FARMS rates allows us to more effectively differentiate support for schools. It is not sufficient to differentiate or distinguish only between Title and non-Title I schools, because there are some non-Title I schools that have substantial numbers of students participating in FARMS. So on this, the table on the left of the slide shows the FARMS tiers for elementary schools, and then the table on the right shows the tiers for secondary schools. You'll notice that the ranges differ for elementary and secondary. So if we're just looking at that tier 3, at the elementary level, 75% to 100%, whereas on the secondary side at tier 3, the range is 60% to 100% students participating in farms. This is to account for or to capture more students or more schools at the secondary level in that tier tier 3, where we provide the highest level of support to schools. So again, school size matters. So as we all know, enrollment is one of the primary drivers and metrics in determining staffing allocations in schools. So although this may seem like basic information, to show, it is important for us to understand what this means in the context of MCPS. And so having an understanding of average, large, and small enrollment size schools allows us to examine what is adequate and equitable staffing at our schools across all staffing categories. And so we just voted here on this slide just to remind or inform people of the average school size for our elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and special schools. These help to us in determining some of our staffing ratios, our thresholds for determining what those ratios should be by looking at that small, average, and large school size. The second high-level topic is our classroom staffing ratios. And so we believe that better staffing ratios promote improved learning environments for both students and staff. As we look at this, on the far left are our current guidelines, the shaded blue column on the left, and then on the far right, that's our starting point for FY27. The staffing ratios reflect our base. When we just looked at the tiers, these reflect our base tier. So again, these are our schools with no or low students participating in farms. On the next slide, we'll show ratios for MCPS only and how we apply the tiers. So here you can see how we apply the tiers. And I'll just call out first grade. So you can see at tier 3, which is the highest need level, 75% to 100% farms. We're starting with a ratio of 1 to 18. And then if you're a school that's at the base tier, the ratio would be 1 to 23. Long term, we want to see kindergarten paraeducators in all of our kindergarten sections. And then general education paraeducators for grades 1 through 5.
So that, we had a budget forum last night, the special resource teachers, for example, the 123, that's where that's what you're talking about here, or part of what you're talking, not that would be for special education, but that would augment this number too, correct, in the elementary level?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
So we can go to the next slide and look at secondary. So here I put both on the same slide. So we're looking at secondary, middle school, and high school. Again, on the far left, you can see our current guidelines where they sort of range from a low of 28 up to as high as 33. And then you can see where we compare with some of our neighboring districts. And then on the far right, FY27, this is our starting point. We're not implementing this new ratio for middle school and high schools in FY27. The plan is to implement these in FY28, but this is the starting point for our planning. But again, it's all a work in progress, and so this could change if we see some significant changes in the demographics in our district.
So we're at 127 now.
So
explain what this is saying?
Yeah, sorry about that. So the 1 to 27 for FY27, that's our starting point in our planning. And so but the implementation for this would take effect in FY28.
Got it. Okay.
But if I may, right now we are in the 1 to 30, 1 to 33 range.
Yes.
That's
where
what I thought.
we currently
Yes.
are.
Okay,
Yes.
I thought it was higher. Okay.
Yeah. So we're keeping our current guidelines there on the
What's
left.
the comma under current guidelines mean? The 20 and 28 and up?
It can vary, I think is what we're calling out here, and it also varies by content area.
Got it. Okay. So it could be 20 or it could be 28 depending on what area you're talking
Exactly,
about.
depending on the subject. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some sort of require
Hold
a
on.
smaller
Okay.
size. But I'm sorry.
Councilor Mink, go ahead.
sorry, also still just, I'm also trying to understand that. So is that saying that the current guideline says 28, but to your point about the fact that guidelines as opposed to standards is loosey-goosey, the guideline is 28, and in reality, what that's resulting in right now is a range of 20 to up to 30 or 33? Is that what's being shown?
That's
here?
correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. 1 to 28 is roughly what it is, but then that range is from 20 all the way up to 33. But it also depends on the content area.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then just to call out the tiers here for the secondary level. So tier 3, the students participating in farm 60% to 100%. The ratio would be 1 to 24, and then if you go down to the base tier, it's 1 to 27. So again, providing that differentiation and targeted support for schools that have slightly higher needs. The third high-level topic is our proposed special education and English language development staffing standards. So on the next slide, actually on this slide and the next slide, we're going to talk about special education. The proposed staffing standards for special education will use a least restrictive environment or LRE-based model for both comprehensive and special schools. Under the, as I'm sure you all know, but just to state it for the record, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, the least restrictive environment ensures that students with disabilities are educated alongside their peers without disabilities to the maximum extent possible. So again, LREA is when students spend 80% or more of their time in the general education setting. LREB, when students spend 40% to 79% in the general education setting. And then LRAC is the most restrictive environment. So this slide reflects the proposed staffing standards for special education. And again, LREA, these are students who are spending 80% or more of the time in general education, so you see a higher teacher to student ratio. So we're proposing a 1 to 15 teacher to student ratio. And then for paraeducators, we propose allocating or providing 1 paraeducator per teacher. And then for LREB, the ratio would be 1 to 8. And there are varying levels based on the student's IEP. So for LREB, there are 2 levels captured. So if a student is level 3, we would allocate or provide schools 2 paraeducators per teacher, level 4, 2.5. And then for the most restrictive environment, LREC, a ratio of 1 to 5. And then you can see there are 4 levels that fit within the LREC category. Now we're transitioning to English language development and our emergent multilingual learners, or EML students. On this slide, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, but just want to lay a foundation around ELP and what that means. So English Proficiency Language Levels, or ELP. So ELP level 1, these are students who are at the initial stage of English language acquisition. ELP 2, these are students who are emerging. They're in the early stages of English language acquisition. Students demonstrate understanding and usage of English with support. The third level, these are students who have moved beyond the basics, formulaic language, and can now demonstrate increased complexity in English language use. And then the final level, level 4, so these are students who are more advanced, they're expanding, excuse me, and they demonstrate increasing proficiency by using specific and some technical content area language. Take a sip here. So on this slide, these are the proposed staffing standards for emergent multilingual learners. So students who are at levels 1 and 2 require higher level of support than students who are at levels 3 and 4. But you can see that we group them into 2 groups by grade level. So students who are at level 1 and 2, they are part of group 1. And so for K to 5, we're proposing a 1 to 30 ratio for those students. And then you'll see that ratio increase For group 2, these are students who are at levels 3 and 4 because they require less intensive supports. And then you see that kind of cascade throughout the grade levels. So for grades 6 and 8, 9 and 12, as students matriculate through the grades, then the ratios decrease, but then they also decrease based on the levels and grouping of the students. So the final topic is the implementation plan. Implementing our staffing standard strategy and taking a forward-looking approach to where we want to be. Next slide, thank you. As a district in the next 5 years and beyond will require investment over multiple years. We recognize that we can't do everything in 1 year. So with that in mind, the proposed implementation plan follows a phased approach with a coordinated cascade of changes and rollouts across school levels. So our first phase focuses on elementary schools as they require the greatest level of investment to support our long-term goals and to build a strong foundation for student success. The second phase centers on middle schools, ensuring continuity of support as students transition from the lower grades to the middle grades. And then the final phase addresses high school, aligning resources to prepare students for post-secondary success. We do plan to have a 6-year part of this where we evaluate and review our progress to ensure that we are on track and to see if we need to make any adjustments. On this slide,
if I could just pause
yes.
you for one second. I was notified there's some technical issues with the video on the council's website. Folks can hear the meeting, but they can't see the slides or anything. So you can turn to YouTube. It'll be on YouTube, and you'll be able to see on YouTube. So for the millions watching at home, your first time before the committee. So please continue.
All right, thank you. So now again, we're talking about implementation. And so want to first cover special education and emergent multilingual learners or English language development. So these first 2 buckets reflect our special education implementation. Some of this you heard earlier in the presentation, but for FY27, we're implementing LREA ratios for teachers and paraeducators at the elementary level. And then for our elementary and special schools, we are providing additional special education resource teachers or RITSEs. And then for the years FY28 through FY2031, we're going to implement LRE B and C at the elementary level, LRE A, B, and C at the middle school level for FY29, LRE A, B, and C for high schools at or in FY 2030, and then for special schools, LREC, all students in FY 29. And then for our emergent multilingual learners, elementary schools in FY 28, middle schools FY 29, high schools in FY 2030.
So what are you going to talk about what that would mean in people at some point? Is that in this presentation?
That is not in this presentation.
Okay. I'd love to see that. I know, for example, that the elementary and special schools, the RITSEs, are in the budget this year. So I know, but I think it would be good to have that, the people, even though this is over years, what that would mean over time so people can conceptualize the numbers a little bit. So maybe if you could follow up with that. Yeah.
Sure, we can come back to that and we can bring it. We just want to keep in mind that if our enrollment continues to decrease,
it could go down.
that would decrease.
Even if it's a
staffing
range,
as well. Sure.
I mean, I know nothing is exact, right? You don't have all 30,000
Correct.
positions filled at any moment. Yes.
Just a projection.
In the report on page 11, there is a projection in terms of the number of new hires that is mitigated by what Ms. Alfonso just noted, which is as enrollment declines, the numbers of staff would also decline. So the two numbers, the highest number would be 3,383 new FTEs, but for the FY27 proposal, there's reduction of 518 FTEs due to enrollment and an addition of 420, resulting in a net of a decrease of 98 for FY27.
All right. Thank you. So we have it there. And is it broken out? You said page 11?
Yeah, it's, this is not broken out. These are projections based on the presentation to the board.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that.
And,
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
and if I say, so that is, this transition where we're going, where potentially we could continue decreasing in enrollment, and it's the
Yeah.
perfect opportunity for us to right size and really analyze that which we've been doing, analyze the needs of our schools to provide the correct staffing. Like you mentioned, the resource teachers for elementary school is not something that we've ever done, but it's needed. And, this would be the opportunity for us to do that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
On the next slide, and this is our final slide. So this is the FY27 implementation by school level. So at the elementary school level, we are implementing the staffing standard for assistant principals and assistant school administrators. Our K-5 class size staffing standards, special education LREA for teachers and paraeducators, like we just talked about, special education resource teachers, and then partial security assistant implementation. We do have a multi-year plan for providing security assistance at all elementary schools. And then for middle schools, there's no implementation for FY28, for FY27. We'll pick that up for FY28. And then at the high school level, we are beginning some changes at the assistant principal level. And we're also adding a point for FTE, Regional Program Teacher Coordinator, to support our rollout of regional programs across all high schools. And I believe that's it.
Great.
Take any
Councilmember Ray, I
questions.
think I had a question on that
Okay.
slide.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to understand, I see that the ASAs are being discontinued at the high schools. Are they going to be like gradually discontinued at other schools as well? Or?
So I just realized as Mr. Francois was going through the slides, it should say the same thing for elementary schools. We are
Great.
discontinuing ASAs at elementary schools as well. Middle schools, we paused that implementation and we are projecting to implement it in FY28 at the same time that we're looking to add a testing coordinator positions at those schools, which will take on some of the responsibilities of assistant principals as to not impact schools too much.
Great, appreciate it. I know that the ASA system has broken a lot of hearts in a lot of schools, and I appreciate you all being responsive to observations and feedback on the ground. And I will also note that the partial security assistance coming in for elementary schools, really thrilled to see that moving forward as well. It's so important, just that extra person, that extra set of hands and extra connection has been so impactful at the schools that have managed to fund those through little corners of their budget, or whether it's Title I or community schools. It's been really meaningful. So great, thank you. Hopefully we can do that.
Awesome. That was the presentation. You were at the end, right? Correct?
That's it,
Okay,
yes.
so I'll ask just maybe one or two questions, then I'll turn to Ms. Evans and Ms. Mink about Councilmember Mink and Evans about their questions. So one of the things I had stuck out to me, the staffing standards established for the Tier 3 kindergarten ratio were 1 to 20 for schools with the highest farms rate, 75 to 100%. The current guideline for Title I and focus schools is 1 to 19. So could you just explain, and I know the guidelines are squishier, but just when you just look at those numbers, it looks like it actually could go up, like the standard versus the guideline. And could you explain? So that would be for the highest poverty schools, the guideline, the standard would be higher than the guideline, at least in kindergarten. Could you just explain that to me? Do you see what I'm asking?
So I'll take it, and I might be, so the Tier 3 is obviously the highest tier of farms.
Yeah.
Right now, the staffing is 1 to 19. We're proposing 1 to 18.
Oh, I saw it was saying it was 1 to 20 somewhere for Tier 3 kindergarten. No?
No, it's 1
Okay,
to
I
18.
just misread it. Okay.
There have been several iterations of this.
Okay,
So
maybe I
just
saw an
keep in
earlier
mind,
version.
Yes. So
Okay.
we have, and we didn't go with a lower or a lower ratio because part of the proposal is to eventually have a para-educator at every kindergarten class.
Right.
So then the ratio of adult to student would
Will go
decrease,
down.
more substantially.
Okay. All right. So there's no intention to go up then, that seemed counterintuitive to me. So that's why I was asking. Okay. So I saw that the total number of classes above the guidelines have increased at both middle and high schools this year, even as the percentage in the optimal range has improved. What schools are driving that increase, and is there a relationship between over guideline rates and the school poverty levels, as I would assume there is? But
So I think, so we're seeing the highest decrease in enrollment at the elementary school, right, as the cohorts are going up. When it comes to high schools, the principals and the schools have a lot of flexibility on how, based on their schedules that the students, that the classes that the students select, how they're going to do the master schedules. So that's why you're seeing, from lower ranges to higher ranges. It all depends on how the principals determine that they're going to break out their master schedule. Right now, and this is the difficulty that we're trying to alleviate and make sure that we no longer have with the staffing standards, is if your class is going higher, you receive more students, the principal has to make a request. We evaluate that request, and then we make the decision based on many factors on whether they will get an additional teacher or additional 0.2 or 0.4, so that they can look at that and decrease some of their class sizes.
so this is where the subjectivity, and if you're the squeakiest wheel, you
Correct.
get it, and someone else who just doesn't advocate as well might not.
Correct. So that's what we're trying to do with the staffing standards, is look at that in terms of, instead of a principal say, I have a higher class size, I'm having some difficulties, making sure that I'm maintaining, a manageable class. Can I get an additional 0.4? With elementary schools now, what we're doing as we move into the staffing standards, we're going to evaluate their enrollment at points throughout the year. So the first touch point this year is going to be April 15th, then May 15th. We'll run all the school numbers. We'll see where their classes are sitting, and then allocate a teacher to that school based on those numbers and based on the guidelines, instead of waiting for a teacher, for a school to tell us we need more. And that's the same thing that we're going to go with high schools and middle schools. And we're also establishing ranges. It's not just a ratio, it's a range and a minimum and a maximum. We know that we don't want an elementary school to sit with 9 students in one class when we have another one, right, that might be at 24. So we're establishing the minimum and those maximums to ensure that there's equity, and that we can look at it and allocate as needed, instead of waiting for those political, things like the principal allocating for additional staffing versus somebody that makes do with what they receive.
I appreciate that. I'll pause there and go to my colleagues first. Councilmember Evans.
Sure. Great to see Ms. Alfonso Windsor and Mr. Francois. So I will say this, I like the intentionality behind what we're doing with the staffing, because it also, and you stated it in the presentation, that you're really looking at the student needs in the classroom. And I appreciate that. So one thing I was, one of my questions you addressed, is in our packet, but you also kind of alluded to that. I was going to ask, so as the council, it would be very helpful for us to anticipate what the staffing needs are going to be. So I like how in the back you told us that in FY27 there will be an anticipation of a reduction of 518 FTEs. Is there a way for us to see maybe 2 or 3 more years, at least for the years that you mentioned, that you're going to try to make the adjustments? Like you have 28, 29, and 30. I don't have the slide presentation in front of me, but the years that you are looking to gradually make the changes, if we could see the adjustments or fluctuations, it would also be helpful to anticipate what might be needed or not in terms of budget. And as a former board member, we always, every budget, try to ensure that the ASAs were out of there, right? Because we know how much of a heavier lift it was for schools to do the work if they weren't recognized as an AP. So the discontinuation, is that all dependent on funding, or is that's based on the budget ask currently?
It is, obviously, everything is
I know,
based
I'm just
on
making
budget
sure.
ask.
I didn't want people to think that it's already.
But
done
the
away
change
with.
for that is, it's, to be honest, a little bit simpler because it's moving from a position that is 11-month to 12-month. So that's really where, a lot of the budget impact would be, which is substantially more than created a brand new position. And again, the staffing standards address a little bit of that too. In the past, it could be that a school might have 2 APs and an ASA. The staffing standards might, because now we're looking at tiers. We have never looked at tiers at the higher levels. It could be that then it's 2 APs, right? So I don't think that is really going to be a change. Okay. Depending on the budget, I think that is everything. I mean, obviously everything is up, but
Absolutely.
that is not something that we are, that we're looking at. But we never know.
Okay. And then with the changes that are being discussed, should we have heartburn about, although we see how it's going to come down the pike, that enrollment is, consistently, or it seems to be consistently decreasing, there's always at the end of, remind me, it's the end of September, and then we will look at what the numbers are going to be. Are we thinking that the numbers are going to not be that high, that would require additional support in the classroom? I know you stated that the different times of the year that you're going to look and just do those checkpoints just to make sure, so you can make sure that you're staying on point. But do you think that it'll be that much of a fluctuation? Because usually it's a couple hundred. I mean, I know in past it's been like maybe 1,000 additional students, but
And that is what we're having difficulty right now because we really don't have trends. We're seeing enrollment decreasing, and we haven't really been projecting enrollment to decrease. We're always kept hoping that we would recover, after the pandemic, but it has consistently gone down. So we're now seeing that for the last 3 years, we have lost like 5,000 students easily. The enrollment has kept decreasing this year. It hasn't gone up, from October 1st. We haven't, in the past, we would get, the immigration policies have changed, right? So we would go students throughout the year. We're not seeing that pattern anymore, at least this year. Mm-hmm. So we are assuming or projecting that we're not going to see an increase after September 30th, that we're going to see decreases. Is that what you were asking?
Sure, yes, because in 5 or 6 years, it could be a change, right?
It could be a change.
We don't know. Mm-hmm. And then because you said that we don't know, how quickly could we be able to put the supports in place that we're removing to try to make good use of the staff that's currently in the system?
So,
and I asked you a question that I know you actually can't answer, but just the thinking.
Yeah, and we have to look through that, obviously. We have to constantly be analyzing where our trends are going, because we're going to need to shift. As we're shifting slowly for that decreased enrollment, then we can, once that increase starts, we can shift to that too. And that's why we're making that shift to staffing standards right now, to make sure that our schools are substantially staffed appropriately, so that if we start seeing that the increase in enrollment is not a hard shift.
Right. And that's really what my question gets to. Is it going to be a hardship? So then one last question before I turn it over to my colleagues to ask. Now, will this look like more professional development for the people that will now come into the classroom? I know they have the skill sets and the expertise, but being in the classroom on a more regular basis, is that going to equate to more in the area of professional development, or not so much?
So part of our budgeting ask, or part of the superintendent's, budget request is there's a big commitment or request to fund more professional development. I think that is a need we have overall for safety, for tier 1, instruction and so on. So it's something that we need to start doing now, regardless, just to make sure that our staff is, fully capable of taking on, anything any instruction and any shifts.
Thank you. Really good questions. Councilmember May.
Thank you. I really appreciate that you all are doing this, and I'll just name that I'm sure not everyone is going to always be enthusiastic about the rollout, but sometimes we have to do difficult things, and making sure that we are equitably distributing staff amongst our schools and students is important. So thank you all for taking this on, and good luck in advance of that feedback. But I think you have support here for that move. And then wanted to just make sure that I understand what standards means versus the guidelines. So the standards, if I'm understanding right, the standards doesn't necessarily mean that there will be no class sizes that are over that limit, right? Or that don't quite meet the standard. And I just want to, so we can be clear with the public, but it means that all schools are going to be judged equitably. So we're going to look at you're going to look evenly at all the data as opposed to by the request of principals, as historically been done at regular points during the year, and trying to get everybody as close to those standards as possible based on the data and the sensible algorithms that you all have put together.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And when you look at our current guidelines, there are no caps that are associated with that. But with the staffing standards and having the ranges, we are putting a cap at the max end, right? So I'm just going to pick a number here, but if we're saying that for one of the tiers, the range is 16 to 21, that means that for that grade level at that school, they will not see a classroom that's over 21. Or if it's another range where the cap is 20, they won't see a classroom that's over 20. And then just to go a little further, staffing standards, when we talk about staffing standards, we're talking about two things. One is how do we provide resources and allocations to schools, but then also what are the standards or the requirements by which we're making decisions, and school principals are staffing their schools.
Great, thank you. So we saw some comparisons with other jurisdictions in which we do not come out too favorably, and appreciate the transparency there and where we're aiming to go. I just wondered, do we know what implementation looks like in the other jurisdictions? Meaning, are theirs guidelines that they're not actually living out on the ground, or are they treating them more like standards? Do you happen to have any? It's okay if you don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know concretely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious of how they're making their budgets work over there. And then lastly, using farms as a factor here and the tiered systems as related, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that. And I'm also thinking about the farms issues that we've had in regards to getting families to fill out those forms, and we obviously saw the impact that had on the Title I classifications. And I wondered is that something that we have solved? Do we have a solution to that yet? Because if not, this is going to be another impact.
So, to be honest, I mean, that we don't have a solution to that, but that's why we're going by tiers instead of the Title I or the focus schools denominations, right? So that if you're a Title I school, you're not going to go down on a tier just because you might have lost Title I status, which I'm not saying that any school is going to lose Title I status. That is also the reason why at the secondary level, the tiers, the percentage of the tiers, are different and lower to account for students in those higher grades that are not filling those farms rates. All right, so we know that we have to capture those because they might not be reporting the same way that the elementary schools are reporting. So that's why we are going through tiers instead of going by Title I or non-Title I schools. That's one way that we're hoping to alleviate that problem. We looked at a lot of data. We look at EverFarms. We look at different points. We had to pick one point to make sure that it was equitable, but also, so we went with what the state is using, right? We went by what the state is using to determine what state funding we get from them when we're looking at farms rate.
Okay, two follow-up questions on that. So one, I'm a little alarmed that we haven't figured out a solution to the forms problem, because then that implies that we're going to have a similar issue with the Title I classifications that we had previously, in there being some inherent inaccuracies. And and I won't bring back the whole conversation from last time, but I can certainly see it being brought back if this continues to happen. And so there's no way that we can just have everybody asked to fill that out, even at the schools where everybody gets the meals already. And
So I guess, I might have misunderstood you. So I'm not sure about the forms. I would have to get back to you on that. Obviously, filling out a form is something that, we have to request parents to do. It is hard to control some of that. So I know that that's something that they're working on. In terms of, I'm assuming that you're talking about the CEP schools where students don't have to fill out the
Correct.
forms. So we cannot require them to fill them out.
Right.
We are trying to account for that through a multiplier to make sure that those schools don't see, a significant impact on them. And I know that, the Department of Food and Nutrition Services is working through that. And we have different outreaches, because I've been involved in that, in trying to make sure that our parents fill out those forms. We're using Parent Square. We have been very successful through that. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question in terms of the forms. I was thinking in terms of if this parents are not reporting, how we account for that. And that's what we're having the different tiers, and not necessarily aligning that to their Title I status.
got it. Okay, appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think the outreach and all of those are important factors to be using here. Of course, we can't require it, but we certainly, obviously, there's other ways to achieve that goal. I just want to make sure that I hear you that you're not using the Title I classification to set the tiers. However, if you're using farms data that comes from the parents filling out the same forms that we use to figure out Title I, then we're going to see a similar situation here. So appreciate you coming at it from several different angles here, and the awareness of that. As we move forward to it becoming more relevant in this coming school year, I'll be interested, and I'm sure others will as well, in understanding the impact and the results of the different interventions that you have in terms of remedying that Title I classification problem, the outreach, and so on and so forth. Last question on this. Yeah, it's true. All right. Last question on this actually is, so for special education, different students have different numbers of hours of services that they're required in through their IEP, et cetera. How is that being taken into consideration? So like, for example, if the ratio is 1 to 15 for the elementary school special education teachers who are working in the least restrictive environment A, of those students, though, you could have some who have 1 hour a day, and you could have some with many, many more than that. Is that being accounted for? How is that being accounted for?
So we know, that is something that has been brought up, and I wish that our special education, the Chief of Specialized Services was here, because she does have a vision and a way to implement that, and that she will work with the administrators on how to manage the different levels of support at that LREA that students have, because we do know, like you mentioned, that the implementation or the resources have to be aligned with the IEP and the hours based on that IEP. But it is part of that rollout and the training for our support for our administrators to be able to use their staff, how the vision is.
Okay. Ultimately, this seems like a math problem, and just, figuring out the right algorithm to make all of this work. But obviously, making sure that we get this right is going to have a huge impact on the ground. So as that plan comes together and firms up, I'll be eager to hear and understand the details.
If I can just say one more thing. If you were to look on our website and you were to look at our documents, this staffing standards is marked as a working draft. And it will continue to be a working draft for months to come, because as we pressure test, this new model, as we listen from our stakeholders, as we look to the future and, the implementation rollout, it is going to be a work in progress. It is not finalized. We can make tweaks, we can listen to our stakeholders, and we can address, any issues that come up. And that's what we're targeting it as a work in progress, because again, it is a big project that we have undertaken, and we want to make sure that we're making the right decisions that will impact the students positively.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilmember Evans.
Sure. And to that point, you said that you will be listening to your stakeholders. Is that also, and I'm making the assumption that it also includes the administrators, because they will be the ones that could really see on the ground if this is working. I think for me, what I keep thinking about is that we should and can assume that there are going to be gaps, because what you stated earlier, not everybody is filling out the form to be able to get that information to determine whether or not they should be getting additional services. And so, like, what can be done, or is there any anticipation of a school might immediately, I believe you stated this earlier, but I just keep thinking about not everybody fills that form out, as Councilmember Mink has mentioned, and what that could look like. I'm thinking about the administrators as well. I'm sure that it's sort of a safety net that they were able to hold on to a spot or two or three, anticipating, depending on their school, what student they might get coming through the front door. So as a former parent, not only as a council member, but as a resident, those are things that I think about, because we want our students to get what they need immediately. And because we have a high percentage of students on free and reduced price meals, right? And then the Ever Farms, right? That's just a concern. So I know we've made this shift, and there's been intentionality towards student needs, but I'm just thinking about how are we thinking about, and I know you're thinking about it, right? But I'm trying to translate that to the community, that there is thought about what can be done, and making this change and shift, and will be different.
Correct. And I appreciate that. And that's why we're looking at this as a work in progress. That is always a concern for us. Over the last few years, Maryland have moved into, the direct certification, for those farm students. So at least we're capturing, that. I don't think we said this at the beginning, but this work started as work groups at all three levels: middle, high school, elementary, and special schools, that involve multiple stakeholders, from administrators to teachers, to a staff, to our supporting services staff, to really understand the needs at all the levels.
Thank you for repeating that, and for people to understand and know what all work is going on behind the scenes.
Thank you. Just want to lift up something both my colleagues just kind of mentioned and ask it a little more directly. In the council staff packet, this was one of their discussion questions. What is the mechanism in which you're getting feedback from staff and students on the standards themselves? Like, how is that actually happening? I know you're saying you're getting it, but how is it happening? Is there a working group? What's the structure of the feedback?
As of to date, so again, we've had school level work groups. So we convened first a large group of stakeholders across all, excuse me, sorry, across all school levels.
When you watch it on TV.
I know, exactly, across all school levels, and also representing our associations. And then we broke out into the school level specific work groups, where we met 2 to 3 times with elementary school level administrators, teachers, and staff, and middle school and high school. And so since releasing staffing for FY27, we've also met with our elementary school principals twice through PLC. Can you remind me of PLC? I'm
Professional
new in still-
learning community.
Professional learning
Okay.
community.
So you're utilizing that. To talk.
And so that's one way that we've gotten some feedback, and we've been trying to help principals through understanding, what these changes mean for them. And I think we'll continue in that vein and just try to find opportunities to continue to engage. But we do plan to bring and reconvene the groups that we started last fall,
Okay.
so that we can continue to show them data, pressure tests, and then also look toward next year, FY28 and beyond.
I didn't hear students.
You did not.
I asked it, but it was not in the answer.
You're right.
I would highly suggest that you find a way to incorporate student feedback. I mean, they're the one. They're experiencing a lot of kids in class too, right? And they, and I know with the elementary, it could, I don't expect you to gather the kindergartners around. That might be more parents or other teachers and other administrators. But at the middle and high school level, or even older elementary, I think you could get some. I think it would be useful to do that, and I think in everything we do, we should be trying to get student impact if we're making big changes. Like we did it with discipline, we did it with other things. And when you're talking about differentiation, right, understanding how students experiencing their class, I mean, I think it's worth talking to those folks. So I would just encourage, and there's groups that already exist that you could probably tap into to do it. So just a strong suggestion.
Sure, thank you. No, we will take that back. Yes, absolutely.
And then I'll just end with I think what both my colleagues also said. Like, I'm just really glad we're doing this, and it's I often use the example of, like, if you're in a classroom of 30 kids, and half may or may have not had breakfast or lunch, another 10 speak English as a second language, another 10 have an IEP. That's a hard classroom to meet the needs of all those students by yourself. And I think the staffing guidelines are reflective of that, and so we want to make sure that everyone has what they need based on what's actually happening on the ground. So I think this is great progress. Great. So we'll look to see how this goes and as you implement it. And thank you for the update. And we'll keep tracking it. Council staff, anything else? No. Okay. We'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much. And you made it through.
All right, good, thank you.
If there were one thing that was the core of why the education system exists, it's how our kids are doing in school academically. That's a big marker. So that's what we're going to talk about now. MCPS academic performance metrics, where we are with the data, where we are with closing gaps across groups. So good to see the team here. How are you? I thought I saw Dr. Hammond in here. Naya is maybe she just stepped away. Okay, yeah, but she's here if we need her later. Okay, great. I'll turn it over to the team. I don't know or to council staff. Is there anything you want to say before we turn it over to MCPS? I'm assuming there's a presentation. A lot of numbers here.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jawando. Just to briefly frame the conversation for academic performance metrics, we have information that will be shared through the comprehensive presentation prepared by Dr. Moran, Dr. Addison, and Ms. Porter. In two main buckets, the first being the Maryland School Report Card for the 2024 through 25 academic year, and the second for the Maryland Comprehensive Program MCAP scores for English Language Arts and Mathematics. And then there's also information interwoven on how the curriculum is being used to support student achievement.
Wonderful. Turn it over to the MCPS team. Dr. Addison.
All right. Good afternoon, Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Mink, and Councilmember Evans. It is a pleasure to be back in front of you again to share an updated view of MCPS's performance as we continue our future-ready journey. I'm joined by my colleagues, Dr. Peter Moran and Mrs. Nikki Porter, to discuss our strategic performance outlook. Now, before we dive into our data, I want to ground our discussion in the definitions that guide our work. We define data literacy as the ability to collect, analyze, communicate, and use multiple measures of data to continuously improve all aspects of the learning organization. Furthermore, data use is the transformation of that data into information and then into action. And this requires an organizational shift away from simple compliance toward a true commitment to improvement through a shared vision. And so as we transition into the specific metrics of the Maryland School Report Card and our Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program results today, I want to emphasize that our goal is not just to report numbers for the sake of compliance. We are here to demonstrate how we are shifting our organizational culture toward a shared vision of improvement. You will see today how we are moving beyond data literacy, knowing the numbers, and into data use, taking the specific instructional and systemic actions necessary to ensure every student in MCPS is future ready. So let's look at how that vision is manifesting and into our current performance outlook. So our commitment to academic excellence is anchored in our 2025-2030 strategic plan. We have established a 4 or more mandate. By 2035, 100% of our schools will achieve a 4 or 5-star rating on the Maryland School Report Card. Currently, 53.5% of our schools have reached that goal. While we see steady performance in English language arts and literacy and gradual gains in mathematics, we are driving further improvement through restructured school improvement plans and new literacy curricula. Next slide, please. When I was before you last July, I showed this same slide and shared again today as a refresher. The Maryland School Report Card is the state's official accountability system aligned with Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. Its primary purpose is to ensure transparency and monitor whether we are serving all students equitably, regardless of background. And this transparency provides our families and policymakers with accessible data, including the 1 to 5-star ratings that connect directly to our strategic plan's academic excellence pillar. Continuing with our intentional connection to our strategic plan, our focus for today is connected to Goal 1, academic excellence. All students will demonstrate high levels of student academic achievement and growth. Objective 1 under Goal 1 of our strategic plan specifically states that MCPS will have the highest academic performance in Maryland as measured by the state report card. This slide illustrates how every data point we track is a reflection of the core objective. This isn't just about numbers, it's about our commitment to the community. As part of our FY26 budget, our return on investment commitment 2 is the 4 or more mandate. We are holding ourselves accountable to ensure every school in this district is a high-performing 4 or 5-star institution by 2035. Looking at the 3-year trend, you can see our movement. For the 2024-2025 school year, we have 18 schools at 5 stars and 89 schools at 4 stars. Notably, we have significantly reduced the number of 2 stars from 15 down to 6. Please note that certain special schools or those with small student populations do not receive star ratings to protect student privacy. Next. The state accountability system is based on 100 possible points across various indicators that vary by grade span. This slide details how the total points are divided across the various indicators for elementary, middle, and high schools. With the visual on the right, there's a green outline for the first 2 indicators. This is because I want to ensure you are aware that those first 2 indicators rely heavily on performance of students on the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. At the elementary and middle levels, 45% or 45 points of student are based on student performance on state assessments. I also want to share that I personally served on the Maryland State Department of Education Accountability Advisory Committee. Our purpose was to extend the work of a state assessment and accountability task force, and as a committee, we reviewed and made 6 recommendations for the Maryland School Report Card. And so I elevate this now because there is currently another accountability task force convening that will likely bring recommended revisions to this very system. So this slide details the overall district performance on the Maryland School Report Card at the elementary level. What you see are each of the indicators, total points possible, points earned, and the extent to which we met the annual indicator for the annual target for the indicator or met the improvement goal for that area. The purple shape on this slide and the following slides are areas of opportunity in the district. So at the elementary level, we earned 11.2 out of 20 points on the academic achievement and 21.1 out of 35 in academic progress. Now, while we met improvement targets in English language proficiency, we did not meet the overall annual target for academic achievement. And this is where our data use definition comes into play, moving from these numbers into targeted actions. Next. Middle schools earned 10.2 points in academic achievement and 20 in academic progress. We are seeing positive improvement trends in both academic progress and English language proficiency at this level, though we still miss the annual target for the achievement component. Our area for opportunity here is progress in achieving English language proficiency, which is based on performance of multilingual learners on the WIDA Access Assessment that is administered in the early part of the calendar year. High schools earn 30 points from the academic achievement indicator, where we currently sit at 15.4 points. We are performing well in graduation rates, but have identified progress in English language proficiency and school quality and student success as critical areas that we need to work on. I will now turn it over to Dr. Moran, who will share our data into action strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Addison. I'm Peter Moran. Grateful to be with you guys here today to talk about this important work. And like you said, Mr. Jawando, the core mission of what we do every day. Like Dr. Addison shared, MCAP and the Maryland School Report Card remain our primary measures of academic performance, growth, and equity across all schools. Our data shows steady performance in English language arts, gradual improvement in mathematics, notable gains in Algebra 1, with persistent gaps that require targeted attention. All school improvement plans have been revised to directly reflect state and accountability indicators and MCAP performance trends. What you're looking at right now on the screen is work that we did with our principals to essentially shrink down the school improvement plan like we had previously presented to you to be something that is not only digestible for our school staff, but for our communities as well. We had a time period there where we were pumping out 40-page school improvement plans, which was difficult for all of us to wrap our heads around. The SIP now prioritizes student proficiency and growth targets, and I really want to hone in on the importance of growth. While we look at student achievement, it's important for us to really focus on progress. Progress for student groups, progress for individual students, and so that is a focus as we go through the monitoring process of the SIP. And of course, closing achievement gaps, the leadership and instructional capacity, which Ms. Porter will talk a little bit more about, and the alignment to the MCPS Future Ready strategic plan. These revisions strengthen accountability and ensure that improvement efforts are data-driven and measurable. Our updated planning process ensures every school is aligned to the Maryland Accountability Framework, and principals and leadership teams are using that report card data to guide instructional decisions and resource allocation. If we go to the next slide, please. So building on previous discussions, cross-functional teams remain a central strategy for school improvement. Cross-functional teams bring together academic, operational, and support offices to provide coordinated assistance. These teams customize support based on each school's specific data profile and needs. So when I think about the key reflections and actions, by aligning SIPs, MCAP analysis, and cross-functional team deployment, MCPS is maximizing the impact of budgeted resources. The revised school improvement plans reinforce the shared responsibility. The cross-functional team structure enables us to customize support and give school-specific solutions that are timely, relevant, and action-oriented. Together, these strategies ensure we remain focused on support and seeing growth in student outcomes. I will now turn it back to Dr. Addison to share more about the MCAP and connections to our strategic plan.
Just one quick question on the SIPs. Yeah, I'll ask it. So we had talked about previously, we were having a side conversation, about the anti-racist audit data being included as part of the school improvement plan. I didn't see it reflected there, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say how is that incorporated?
So that is really just the public facing page that contains the student
Yeah, I figured that,
achievement
yeah.
and really the components of the report card. Within each school improvement plan is actually monitoring plans that directly correlate back to, under culture and climate, the anti-racist audit. So it is a part of the school improvement plan. We've created a front-facing, really one-pager that schools utilize. Back in the days, almost if you think of the linkages chart, where you could have the school improvement plan included on one sheet.
So, but that data is informing.
Correct.
It's on the back end.
It's informing, and it's also being utilized when we disaggregate our climate results by race and focus groups that we're utilizing in schools. So that is a key component to school improvement. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now let's pivot to the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program data, which provides the foundation for many of the report card indicators we just reviewed. The Maryland Comprehensive Assessment data, or MCAP, is still under Goal 1 and directly aligns with Objectives 2 and 4 of our strategic plan. Next slide, please. So the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program measures proficiency in English language arts and literacy and mathematics based on Maryland College and Career Ready standards. I want to share appreciation for Ms. Cummings and your analyst for her summary and synthesis in the report. We're not bringing a lot of data forward, but we're going to show a different view than we have in the past. But in school year 24-25, for all of our English language arts and literacy tests, combined, 57.7% of students met proficiency, which was an increase of 2.6 percentage points over the 2022-23 school year. And for all tests in mathematics combined in the 2024-2025 school year, 35.7% of students met proficiency, an increase of 2.9 percentage points over the 2022-2023 school year. I also want to inform you that as the committee that MSDE is transitioning to its new assessment infrastructure. And so a new assessment vendor has been identified, and beginning in the 2026-2027 school year, there will be a new state assessment. And so I'm elevating this because with the new state assessment, some of the things that you can expect is, anticipating a standard setting year. And so this often involves transition of different adaptive testing aspects. There's going to be some scoring calibration and potentially some accountability delays. And so raising that because we're looking at what has been in place for a while, but for this next school year, we're not yet sure what may come forward. Next slide. So in English language arts and literacy, we are seeing a steady performance increase across our groups and we remain focused on closing gaps of our student groups. This is a new view of intersectionality based on feedback from Councilmember Jawando when we came in July, and the request was, what does the data look like when you look at race and gender together? And so what you will notice is a pattern in English language arts where, for the most part, across most gender groups, the female students are outperforming their male peers across all racial ethnic groups. And one of the other things that you can easily discern when looking at this bar chart are the gaps or disparities across racial ethnic groups for our student groups. And so you will notice for our Black or African American students, you see that while 54.5% of the female students were proficient in 2025, the Black or African American male students, 42.7%, were proficient in literacy in 2025. And while you see those steady increases in literacy across the 2 years for each of the groups, there are differences in terms of performance across racial ethnic groups. Next slide, please. Oh.
Thank you. I was just going to say thank you for doing that. I think it's really important that we disaggregate in as many ways as possible so we can meet the needs of all students where they are. And obviously, I've been talking a lot about the male-female gap that's been getting a lot of talk in the world, particularly in this, education. So it's just important that we meet the needs of everybody. And so this is helpful. I will ask you, I don't know if you'll get to this, but in the back end, I'll just prepare you. It's great having it, but then it's like, well, what are we doing about it? And that'll, so if you're going to speak to that, great, but just be prepared to talk about that. Thank you.
Yes, next. Thank you. And this is a similar view for mathematics, and with a similar intersectionality view for mathematics, slightly different pattern is observed where male students and student groups are outpacing their female peers. And for example, white males with 62.2% of their white males with 62.2% and Asian males with 64.5% both show higher proficiency rates than their female peers in 2025. And this data also underscores a critical area of concern, as you will see. Our Hispanic, Latino, and Black or African American students of both genders continue to perform significantly below the district average in addition to their racial, ethnic, diverse peers. Most notably, Hispanic Latino females recorded the lowest proficiency rate at 13.5, followed by Hispanic Latino males at 17.9. And to what you just shared, Councilmember Jawando, we definitely recognize that this is where the opportunity gap is most pronounced for our students, and the work that we are doing in terms of that data into action. And so I'm now going to turn it over to Mrs. Porter, who will share some data to action insights.
Thank you, Dr. Addison, and good afternoon. It's good to see you. So we want to certainly acknowledge that we are seeing some gradual progress in some areas, but certainly we know a lot of work to be done, particularly as it relates to our Black and Brown students and students receiving special education services and our English learners. One of the areas that we really wanted to start with was our instructional vision. And we have created a vision for Tier 1 instruction, that is first instruction that all of our students are expected to receive in the classroom. And that vision really emphasizes that there is an expectation that there's evidence-based instructional strategies taking place, that our teachers are using what is called science of learning. We've been training our teachers around how students learn and how they retain information and how they stay most engaged. And so that is something we expect to see in the instruction. We also are expecting our teachers to teach at the grade level standard, and students receive that rigorous instruction. Our core belief, because we are a district that has the largest EML population in the state and also has a very large population of students receiving special education services, the expectation is that our classroom teachers, our grade level teachers, are planning with those students in mind. So it's not, we're going to plan and then we're going to figure out what to do with these students receiving services, but that they are part of the initial planning that takes place as they're working with the staff. So there's an expectation that our English language development teachers and our content teachers are working together, may not be teaching together, but that they are certainly planning together to address the needs of our students. And then our vision is that we will have high quality materials, that we will have meaningful engagement, that our teachers will provide timely feedback to our students, and that we will integrate the language development, that language that our English learners need, into instruction. Ms. Evans, you might be familiar with that triangle at the bottom. That is years ago, we had what was called Studying for Skillful Teacher, which was a professional development opportunity that we provided our staff around the best instructional practices. And it was mandatory at the time that we train our staff on these great instructional strategies. And over time, it's still available in our district, but we have fewer and fewer individuals taking it. So we are elevating Studying for Skillful Teacher back into the district, new edition. I think it's on the 8th edition, and we will be bringing that back. We've been working with the author of the framework, Rick Dufour, to make sure that that is something that all of our teachers have throughout the spring, moving into next school year, and we'll be using all of our support staff in central office to build the capacity of our school-based folks to deliver high quality instruction at the tier 1 level. So if you go to the next slide, so that's the instructional expectations. So this just talks about where we are with our curriculum. So obviously, to have great instruction means we need to have the best resources in front of us. Just to update you, last time we presented, we shared that we had new elementary literacy curriculum. Core Knowledge Language Arts, or CKLA, was the literacy curriculum. And so we are in year 2, and that is really focused on science of reading and really implementing those foundational literacy skills for our students. And so that is off and running, and we are really providing the coaching and support to our teachers with that. And then this school year, we have in our middle schools, also CKLA curriculum, Core Knowledge Language Arts, in middle school for the first time. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're seeing play out in the implementation phase. We also have mathematics curriculum that we purchased prior to the pandemic. So this is actually year 6. And we are at a place where we're ready to look for new curriculum. It's that time. We always reevaluate every 5 years. We asked for a 1-year extension. And so now we have a request for a proposal out. We are evaluating products and hope in the next several weeks that we will have something to share with the board for approval. So just so you know where we are, and then that would require training during the summertime to get our teachers up to speed on whatever it is we select. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that we are doing differently this year is obviously we talked about good first instruction, tier 1 instruction, but we know there are many students who need additional support, either through tier 2 instruction, which is maybe a reteaching, or there might be a specific skill that needs some support, or tier 3, which means more intensive evidence-based interventions. And so we have implemented at the elementary level something called FIT time, focused instructional time. Some might call it WIN time, what I need time. And that essentially is 30 minutes of dedicated time every day. In most schools, it's every day, where they are providing either tier 2 instruction, tier 3 instruction, or for some students who don't need it, they may be getting additional enrichment. So it is basically really figuring out what students need and providing that time for them on a daily basis.
You'll be happy to hear my first grader comes home and says, I have fit time today. So
good. So that is really important. It's also something we felt was really important to do, but the state also is requiring that we find time for intervention throughout the school day. And so this is how we are making that happen. The other thing is that the state of Maryland, through their new reading policy, is requiring that we have what is called student reading improvement plans. And so we are actually getting started a year early with these improvement plans. They're actually mandated for next school year. But essentially, it's our way of communicating with families that there is an area of concern, and we are providing some type of plan for this student, and it outlines for the family what the plan is. And usually they're getting that instruction during that FIT time. But it really is just a communication tool. So the expectation for next school year is that tier 2 and tier 3, students in tier 2 and tier 3 interventions would have a plan that would be sent home as well for families. Next slide. So I shared with you that we are implementing new curriculum at the middle school level for literacy. And we have a partnership with, it's called the New Teacher Project, or TNTP. And they have been working with us to do rounds of classroom observation so that we can determine how well the implementation is going. And so you can see here, this was actually at the beginning of the school year, we worked with 12 schools and did 20 observations of writing lessons and 45 of reading lessons. And if you go to the next slide, you can see here that we have for the reading, this is just the type of data that's being collected. 96% of the classrooms were using grade level text when they went in to do their observations. And I want to say, part of a challenge with implementing new curriculum is sometimes it becomes easy to slip back into old habits. And so one of the things we really want to make sure when we're implementing is that teachers are using the new curriculum and as designed and really maintaining that level of rigor. And so it's great to see 96% of our classrooms when they went in were using grade level worthy texts. 71% of classrooms demonstrated substantial time focused on the text. 56% included text-dependent questions. And then we know there's some areas of growth. And that student discourse is something that was an area that we always want to encourage more discourse with our students, particularly our EML students. They really need that opportunity for the talking and discussion. Question sequencing is another area that needs additional support. And so that is something that we were working through with our professional development. And then if you go to the next slide, we shared the writing lessons. 95% of classrooms were doing the aligned writing lessons. 70% of classrooms included writing tasks at the grade level. And you can just see there the different topics, text-dependent questions, critical questions. And there we have, again, areas that we need to focus on through our learning. So we just actually finished our second round of observations with TNCP and collecting that data to see if some of these areas are improving. So that's something we can report back to you on in a few weeks after we have that information. The next area.
Just on that slide, Councilmember Evans has a quick question.
Yes.
So you had mentioned that you'd already did it at, did you say 12 or 19 schools?
12.
12. Will every school have that TNTP?
So the decision for this year was to stick to the 12 schools, but I do actually think it'll be very important data to collect to see if there's a difference between the performance of the schools who had there will be a total of 3 walks for the school year. But we are using that information to help develop the professional learning and support of the resource teachers as well. So that's for all the schools.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, if you can go to this slide. So just want to provide you an update on what's happening with our math policy. You saw the data that in the district, the math, 35% of our students are demonstrating proficiency with math. And I believe in the packet that you received, we're ranked number 5 in the state. It's a problem that I believe the state recognizes. The mathematics is an area that we all need to be working to support. And so MSDE is actually changing mathematics pretty significantly. Starting in 2027-28, we'll have new standards. And then these 4 areas will be developed around different instructional materials. There is going to be an expectation around multi-tiered systems of support, an expectation around supporting our staff, and then assessments. As mentioned, the assessments will change and the accountability will change. So if you go to the next slide, they'll be changing some of the course sequence. Currently we have algebra, then geometry, then Algebra 2, and they are going to create something called integrated algebra, which will integrated algebra 1 and algebra 2. So they will integrate that geometry into those courses. There will be an expectation that students have interventions immediately if the data indicates they need it. And on the flip side, if the data indicates that students are demonstrating proficiency, that there's an immediate plan for acceleration. And also, again, the communication with families. One of the things that's not mentioned here that is going to be pretty significant is that there will be an expectation of 60 minutes of mathematics at the middle school level. Currently, there's about 45 minutes of math, and that doesn't seem like a big difference, but it actually is going to be pretty significant to find that time and figure out what must be adjusted to make that increase. And so we actually have a work group with teachers and central office staff and students to really discuss how that additional 15 minutes is going to play out on a day-to-day basis. And then my last slide really just focuses on our English language development. We have really been stressing that English language learners are all of our students. It is not the responsibility of just an English language development teacher. They only see the students 30 minutes to an hour a day. It is all of our responsibility. And so all of our teachers, general education teachers, content teachers, need to understand the goals of our English learners and also what we call the WIDA framework. And it's the framework for how we teach academic language to our students. And so we have been doing a great deal to teach our staff, our principals, and even central office staff in terms of how we are supporting our English learners and making sure that they have access to grade level content. So that's a lot of what we've been up to. Last slide just simply reiterates, that we are recognizing that there are some trends that are moving in the right direction, but we certainly know we have a lot of work to do. And at this time, we'll stop and take questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update and transparency and additions to the data and all the background. One of the things we were discussing, if there are, I know you're always fine-tuning your presentations for us up until the last minute, so sometimes we have a presentation, the public, in the packet that's different from the one that was presented. So if we could just make sure that we get the final one, because sometimes there's a little different information, so we can put it up and then it can be emailed to us as well. But really appreciate the information. And I'll start where you ended, Ms. Porter. I always want to call you your former name. No, it's not okay. I'm repping for your.
Yes, he would appreciate
for
that.
your husband.
It's not okay.
So that we're making incremental progress, but there's still very persistent gaps, right? And the pace is something I'm concerned about, right? So I want to allow you all to talk a little bit about that. And I know we've got Dr. Nia Hamlet here from the Equity Unit, so you're welcome to join at any point if you feel like you want to say something, or council members are welcome to ask you to say something, but just so you're here, we're glad you're here and your team. What are we thinking about, because obviously at this pace, we won't solve these problems in more than a generation. It's been a persistent problem for a long time in education, right? These opportunity gaps. So what's our latest thinking? And I know we're doing a lot of things at once about how we can both target and accelerate the improvement and pace of narrowing these gaps and increased achievement.
So I'll start, and please feel free to jump in on anything. I think the first thing is that when you leave things up to choice, you leave them up to chance. And so I'd say that to say the instructional vision of our school system has not been one that has been very clear. And there's been a lot of choice. And what I mean by that is if you go into any of our schools, and I'm sure you guys have seen school improvement plans, posters that say good first instruction, strong tier 1 instruction, great whole group instruction. The definition of that can vary from school to school, and it actually shouldn't. And so it's grounded in research research that we once utilized with fidelity across all of our schools, and it creates inequity in terms of the experience that a student has in a classroom. So we're no longer leaving any of that up to choice. We are tightening accountability, and some people are appreciative of it and others are not. And what I mean by that is it's great to have an instructional vision that has very clear metrics for success, but we're moving towards all of our schools utilizing an observational process that measures teacher performance on that vision and those key levers, and it goes directly to the gender gap as well. We have teachers that may have some of those pieces in place, but may not even have knowledge of some of those pieces. And I'll give you a very quick example of just an experience that I had in my neighborhood. So my neighbor right across the street is a first-year teacher, and she is all in, wants to be an incredible teacher. She got some negative feedback from her principal, so she came across the street asking, what's going to happen, and I asked her what was in your feedback, and she started to allude to words from skillful teachers, specifically a word, cognitive empathy was a word, which is a research-based strategy that's utilized in skillful teacher. So I said, well, what? She said, I don't know what cognitive empathy is, Peter. And I said, well, what's in skillful teacher? And she said, what's skillful teacher? And so I say that to just say, if I'm a principal giving feedback to someone on something that they've never received research professional learning on, that they don't understand is a component to excellent first good instruction, then we need to recalibrate and get back to basics and ensure that the fundamentals are happening in every single classroom. So right now we're rolling out a thing to collect also, and one of the things that we need to bring forward to our board and to our council is not just student achievement data, but actually observational data of what's happening in classrooms, because observational data is what changes student achievement data. You can look at student achievement data all day long, but until you change the practices that are happening in classrooms, that data won't change. So rolling out a accountability of everyone utilizing the same exact structure to lay out the expectations, but then monitor what's happening in classrooms, I think is a very significant shift for us. It doesn't seem that significant, but it's necessary and it's happening right now. And like I said, some people are very much on board with it, but for others, it's taking choice away and interpretation of what they may believe is first good instruction that could be outdated or irrelevant for today's learner.
Go ahead, Ms. Porter, go ahead.
I also wanted to say, yes, we are aligning the professional development and the observation back and forth so that teachers and administrators are working together on what they just learned in their professional learning that we do think is going to make a difference. But the other thing I think is important, when we look at data and we're helping our schools look at data, we have almost 2,000 students in grade 5, 1,500 students in grade 3, almost 3,000 students in algebra who are 1 to 2 points away from meeting proficiency on the state exam. So it is really understanding who those students are, right, what particular standards they may need support with, and really focusing on the data in that way. And so we are working together, our offices, to really help our principals understand how to move our students, specifically with the standards.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, and there's a danger in that if we're just chasing proficiency numbers if we just focus on bubble students. And I know you're not saying that, but I just think we have to make sure, like, for example, my next question was going to be, we went from 1 to 3 one-star schools in a year. I want to know, like, what are those schools? What happened? What are we doing about it? And so just before so I would love to know the answer to that question, but I agree with you. We got to move because it's leaving money on the table. Like, you got to definitely, and it's not demonstrating kids are so close, but obviously we still want to make sure we're moving the people who are the furthest behind and you got to try to differentiate all across. And I know you're not saying not that. But back to, before you answer my star school question, what you said makes a ton of sense. How are parents, and how are we, or how is the board, how do we know how that's going? That instruction, the shift that you talked about, which I agree is like so important. What are the metrics that are reportable metrics for community or oversight bodies to know that that's happening and happening well?
So I think it's actually having an infrastructure to report out, similar to what and I almost did the same thing.
I know, I started it.
What Ms. Porter just shared. Having a way to share out exactly what you're seeing in classrooms, not only in an individual school, but in a cluster of schools or as an entire school system. Currently, right now, the way it is we don't have a mechanism to report out on the quality of instruction across an entire group of schools.
That's what I'm asking. So what are we going to?
Because they all used very different, methods to do that. So now they'll all be using the same method. So we can compare school to school, a school in the, the north, for whatever, however we want to do that, and then use that as a part of the school improvement plan to actually, one, determine the instructional focus and goals, but also to report out to our community when we're reporting out. And then you correlate it with the student achievement data, right? So you put out that student achievement data and start having conversations with parents about and then also having parents have an understanding of what these things are so that they can also apply them in different ways at home. Because they're many of them are very, applicable at the table when you're doing homework with your child.
Yeah. So at some point we'll be able to get to the point where you'll have that. When do you think you'll have that in place so that you could actually do that cross comparison?
So we'll have baseline data by the end of the school year that I think is necessary for us to have to, one, create a healthy sense of urgency across our school system, two, inform the need for professional learning, and be able to share that out with teachers, our union partners, so that they understand the direction that we're going. But we need a baseline, and we don't have a baseline. So getting a baseline by the end of the year, and then schools utilizing that data to create their school improvement plans, and then implementing, continue to implement in the same exact process in the fall to see the change in, not only student achievement, but the teaching practice data as well.
Great. Well, I'm excited about that. I'm eager to see how that moves. I appreciate the question. To the one-star school question, Ms. Addison, did you pull that up? Dr. Addison? Dr. Moran.
Well, I'm gonna use some Dr. Addison knowledge right here. So I think one of the key things for why we saw a lot of improvement, honestly, is that Dr. Addison taught our principals and made sure that they understood the components of the Maryland State Report Card. I would argue prior to Dr. Addison, it was kind of left up to, again, choice, right? If I wanted to focus in on that as an important thing, then I'd focus in on that. But it wasn't also, it's now a directive from our superintendent. So we are not chasing all different things. We have one goal that we're working towards. That's the Maryland State Report Card, which understandably, that's our state accountability system. It makes sense that it is. But I think what happened is that Dr. Addison's professional learning resulted in people seeing places that they very quickly could get points, whether it was well-rounded curriculum, whether it was chronic absenteeism. So they really started to see where they could get some early wins. And so once you get those early wins are usually easy wins, right? And then, so now we're going to be moving towards the more challenging wins, which are grounded in that academic achievement that Dr. Addison highlighted earlier.
So that would explain the vast majority of schools that move up, which is great, like out of the lower tiers to the higher tiers. But I was asking about there were schools that moved into the lower tier.
Right.
And I just want to know what's going on.
For some of those, again, it is connected to academic achievement, but chronic absenteeism is a heavy aspect of the Maryland School Report Card. As a committee, the committee I mentioned that I was on with the state, we talked about, and there were all different districts were represented, some superintendents were represented on that committee, and we talked a lot about that chronic absenteeism indicator as a measure of the Maryland School Report Card, because it is one that is very challenging for a school to directly impact, right? And so I've always said, right, like at the elementary level, you know, the families bring the child to school. At the middle school level, it's kind of a mixed bag. But at high school, and I have a high school senior who has that lovely senioritis, making sure that they are getting up and out to school impacts. And the other aspect of chronic absenteeism is that it includes excused and unexcused absences. So regardless of, you know, a reason why a student may need to be out of school, it's going to count as part of that. And so for those schools that, and I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Moran, in terms of the work that's done with the schools who may have gone down, but for those schools, there is that intentionality of looking at their data, and schools are actively asking questions because of the restructuring of the school improvement plan to ensure that they are focused. And one of the things I didn't elevate, and I appreciate Dr. Moran for kind of elevating the professional learning, but the Maryland School Report Card data is lagging data. And so it comes out in December, those students have moved on. And so part of that professional learning conversation with schools is how do you connect lagging and leading data? So the leading data are the things that are happening in the everyday classroom, those district assessments, the MAP assessment, any formative assessments. And so really that conversation is, okay, you know you want to influence your mathematics proficiency. We use the MAP assessment. We did some research and we show here's the score on the MAP assessment that is likely to predict that a student will get that, you know, expected score on the state assessment in the spring. And so there's intentionality from schools to monitor their students beginning with that first fall administration of the MAP assessment to support them with that ongoing monitoring those students who might not yet be there in the fall, and the intentional interventions and strategies that Mrs. Porter mentioned as well.
And could maybe I'm not being clear here. What were the two schools that went from?
Let me get those for you.
Say it again.
I will get those.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
would like to know that, and I think know what's in it, because it would be a good case study. I want to know why. You know, I think you're saying kind of anecdotally maybe that chronic absenteeism may be a big driver, but I'm curious to know when we had all these people going up, when you have doubling or tripling of the schools into the 1-star, even if it's a small number, you know, it's 3 total out of 211. I just want to know what happened. I'd be curious. I'm sure I'd be curious to know who and what's happening there and what we're doing about it. So, okay, I'm going to turn this time first to Councilmember Mink and then Councilmember Evans. Yeah, Councilmember Mink.
Thank you for this. The kind of data that interests me the most is when we're able to see comparisons with some kind of control group or something that allows us to understand the effectiveness of a particular intervention on the goals that we're trying to achieve. And so we're doing there's a lot of efforts happening, but how do we know which are having the greatest impact and on whom, especially as we're trying to address the opportunity gaps and understanding what is having the greatest impacts on our Black and African American students, on our Latino and Hispanic students. So could you speak to how you are using data to make decisions about which interventions to lean into more or less?
Certainly. So we definitely use the assessments that Dr. Addison referred to. Those are not necessarily the state assessments, but our Dibbles assessment, our MAP assessment in particular, to inform which of our students should receive some type of intervention.
Sorry, let me clarify. So if you're trying a particular type of intervention and hoping to see it make a dent in those scores, how can you determine, so you might see an overall improvement in scores, but we're doing a number of different interventions, right? So how do you know which interventions are really being effective in the way that we're hoping? I still recall one really exciting committee session where we saw really great data where they had isolated a variable and demonstrated that something worked. And I do believe that it was having full-time restorative justice positions at particular schools. And at those schools that had them compared to comparable schools that didn't, we saw improved results, and I can't remember exactly what the metrics were, but they were quite striking, and we saw really notable results specifically for those target demographics. And I looked at that and I said, please bring that to the budget conversation, right? Because this is a great defense for asking for more funding for those positions. Now we don't have those positions anymore. And so I want to know, like, what are the other things instead of that are working better, demonstrably better? And like, that's why we're leaning into those more, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Thank you. So I will say that we had math coaches, and we saw that we were definitely making gains with the coaches. And so now we have the cross-functional team members. And what we did, because we saw that schools that had the coaches were making about an average of 12 percentage point gain. And so we took all of that learning from the math coaches and used it with our cross-functional team members. And so it's our hope that we're going to see the same type of gains across our district with the schools that have the cross-functional team members working specifically with all the content areas, math, literacy, but we specifically took the learning from the math coaches to apply it to the cross-functional team members. So that type of support from central office we are certainly using. But if you're referring to actual evidence-based interventions, we have specific approved interventions that we use, and depending on what the skill is that students need in literacy, mostly literacy, we do have math interventions, not as many, we will assign that intervention to the student.
And if I could add,
please,
to your question, I think the other aspect that we engage in to understand the extent to which programs, interventions are meeting the needs of students is our program evaluation process, as well as in the budget. You heard Dr. Taylor share about our return on investment framework. And so that intentionality that we're connecting and being intentional across our fiscal management committee, our policy management committee, our strategic planning committee, in terms of ensuring that for the things that we are investing in, that we are ensuring that there is some type of metric and some evaluation in terms of the extent to which it is doing what is intended to help us understand that return on investment. So we have a few program evaluation studies. We have one of core knowledge, CKL literacy assessment for the year one. And we have, to what you expressed in terms of that comparison group, right? But that one is more observations. We have a few evaluations of mathematics programs that are an intervention at the secondary level that does exactly where you're asking. And so we can make sure that we share those as they come out so that you can have a better understanding in terms of, okay, here's that line item of investment, and then what's the evidence that we have to support that this investment is actually yielding what is expected using that comparison model of students who may have received it versus compared to those who didn't.
Yeah, I see Dr. Moran's got his finger on the button.
So I just going to kind of go back to what I shared with Councilmember Jawando. And not to diminish, interventions are extremely important. And students absolutely need them, but we're not going to intervene our way out of our academic achievement issues. And so I say that to say, again, to go back to the first intervention is excellent first instruction that happens in front of your teacher. And a major concern that I have when we look at interventions is a couple of things. Who's leaving the classroom to go out for an intervention? What are they missing while they're out of the classroom, right? And also, how long are they in that intervention? Because there's also the time where, like, after you've done an intervention for 6 to 8 weeks, and if it's proven not to be effective, you should not be in that intervention anymore, and the intervention should change. So I just want to, again, just to get back to the importance of being with your classroom teacher and getting what you need in that time, like that's the it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And so to clarify, when I said intervention, I don't necessarily mean the type of intervention where you're coming in after the fact. I mean, any kind of change that we're making, especially one that might have a fiscal impact. the ideal is to have it then resulting in increased achievement and increased opportunities and increased, a closing of the disparities that we're seeing. So, so I'm certainly talking about everything that's on the front end of that and on the prevention side. And you'll see that that also reflected in some questions that I sent over asking for some more data for us to look at in regards to the session that we're having on Monday in regards to absenteeism and so on. Where is the data? I know that has been a priority of the superintendent. And I know that I'm not saying that I don't think you do it. I'm saying we need to have it at these sessions because that's what we can point to when we're in these budget discussions. And so having that integrated into these, integrated as opposed to, siloed, like here's what we're doing and here's kind of the big picture of the scores, integrated into these conversations to show the reason we think that these scores went up at these schools is because that is what really allows us to make a defense for the budget that we are asking for. So the more of these committee sessions, all of them, please, like if we're going to be listing, here's the things that we're doing, then please any kind of data, and maybe sometimes it's qualitative, and especially if we're heading for a baseline, that's going to be our first. But maybe why did you select this? What's the data that was used to make the selection? But something to explain, so it's not just list of interventions and kind of like annual or year over year. It just doesn't allow us to explain how what we're doing is different than, that graphic that Dr. Taylor likes to put up with all the arrows going in different directions. And now they're all going in the same direction and they have meaning, but like where is the meaning for us to understand and explain here? And especially being able to compare what are the most effective interventions that are specifically targeting, is specifically effective with the groups where we really, really need to be seeing faster gains.
Yeah, and were you done?
No, but
no, you don't have to be. But I just want, on your point, I just wanted to say, this is a potential way to look at it because I really appreciate the point. And Dr. Addison, since you're here, like you're evaluating things kind of on a schedule. You have an evaluation schedule, and so not intervention, whether it's curriculum, program change, intervention, whatever it is that you're using to, it would be great to talk about the evaluation of said things in the context of the discussion we're having. Does that make sense? Like, so if we're talking about the drivers of student achievement, which there are many, we've talked about several today, and I asked, how are we assessing the first instruction skilled teach, like you said, we got to create a baseline, so, or the curriculum, there's another one, we're changing multiple curriculums next year, right? And so there obviously will be some sort of evaluation of how that's going. And I think we just need to be able to, in context, talk about the evaluation piece of what's working with the data of where kids are. And does that make sense? And I think so. It would almost be helpful as you're preparing to talk to the board and talk to us about these things. Like you could say, okay, here are the relevant evaluations that I think would relate, and then kind of embedding that into the conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. Oops, sorry. And that is and I didn't say it as eloquently as you did, but that is the intentionality in terms of the work that we're doing with our fiscal management committee and our policy management committee in terms of that intentional structure around here's the line item, the finances, and here's the program evaluation study that connects to that, and here's the evidence from that shows that, this is working as intended, and let's maintain. Our meeting got postponed, so there's a fiscal management committee meeting, I want to say March 23rd, that I'll kind of be speaking more to that intentional structure and the guidance in terms of how the board is going to be examining the results from our program evaluation studies to talk and reflect on kind of those investments in the aspect that you just mentioned.
And I just think it's important to you in guiding your work in the schools and everything else, but it's also important to the public, I think, to see and understand that's happening and what is not working, and to make the case of why all the work we're doing. So if you had other questions, go ahead.
Yeah, I also wanted to just look at the our kindergartners who are coming in at such a wide range of places. 45% of kindergartners are on track in literacy at the beginning of the year, and 37% are far behind. And the job of a kindergarten teacher is a sizable task. But I just wanted to get your thoughts about the impact of our child care centers and having preschool opportunities, and the impact that we see on providing the pre-K opportunities to our students, which we've talked about many times before, and I know that we all agree is important. But as we look at the importance of our kindergartners being on track when they come in, and the impact that that has on their learning curve from there, and also the fact that the non-recommended cuts to the CIP include, and I know they're non-recommended and you all don't want to make them, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to make your case here, includes the planned childcare centers, which of course provide an opportunity to prepare more of our preschool age children to be ready for kindergarten. So if you could just talk a little bit about dealing with having such a wide range for our kindergartners who are coming in, and what that means for them, and what down the road, and also the impact of the child care centers, and making sure that more of our kids get that time before they enter kindergarten, and the impact that we see on that in the classroom when they come in.
So the first thing I would say in terms of so you're referring to the KRA data for our kindergartners. I think, and we have not had the opportunity yet to share this data with
Kindergarten readiness.
Yeah, did I say?
No, you just didn't say it. I think no speaker.
It's
yeah,
giving you
sorry.
the
Okay.
acronym, yeah.
Kindergarten readiness assessment.
Yeah. So what we've seen, and Dr. Addison can share a little bit more about KRA, but what we've seen with our DIBELS data is that we've seen significant gains with our kindergartners moving up right around between 65 and 70% this winter, right? So I think our kindergartners, our performance, we're very pleased with where that is moving, and it's been significant movement. In regards to the pre-K, so as a former principal, and seeing the impact that pre-K has on kindergarten, it's substantial and across multiple academic, social, family engagement, transition to kindergarten, because commonly, you're transitioning from a pre-K program often right into kindergarten in your own school. So the opportunity for our kids to receive pre-K instruction is a game changer. And if you follow the data of students that have had pre-K and versus students that have not had pre-K, and look at them in different whether it's by race or whether it's by farms, you see a significant difference in their performance over time. And I think so that's also one of the most important things is it's not only just kindergarten, but it's actually looking at those students as they matriculate through elementary school. If you have a pre-K program in your school, I mean, it's an essential part of your instructional program that really is a game changer. You get parents in a year earlier. So I mean, I can't underplay the significance of a pre-K education for any child, let alone every child.
Well said. And I think that this is another example of where talking about it in terms of here's the investment that we could make to add child care centers to be able to provide the preschool opportunities to more of our kids. Here's the academic result, right, that would have, that we could anticipate if we're able to bring more of these kids in earlier. Here's the impact that we could expect it to have in terms of closing the opportunity gap. Because I think so often, people want to say, well, we can cut things that are outside the classroom. We can cut things that are outside K through 12. But so many of those pieces are things that, even if you're only looking at just the K through 12 piece, which we all need to care much more than that. But some of these things, like this is an example, have tremendous impacts. So in terms of dollars for results, we're losing a lot. And I think that case is an important one to make with everything, but including even on the CIP side and even in the kind of outside the K through 12 arena.
And just to address your kindergarten readiness assessment aspect, it was a new assessment this fall, and so it is. I have been sharing that it's essentially we're resetting the baseline. It's a different assessment. It has different areas. As Dr. Moran mentioned, it's not one that we have fully yet unpacked. The aspect of pre-kindergarten access programming is a factor, and I think one of the things that, and I work collaboratively with the Children's Opportunity Alliance, and we talk about kind of that kindergarten readiness data and that as a metric, and thinking about in our county access to pre-K from MCPS is income-based, right? Mm-hmm. So that is a certain group of families that are included, and just for awareness of that is one of we're going to be doing a program evaluation of early childhood programming for full day to kind of get at what you are asking. And so there are things that are often on our roadmap or often in our list of things that we are actively working on to support the budget process and the budget conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, Councilmember Evans.
A lot of what was on my mind has been said in terms of what metrics would show us that we're being successful. It was really good to have this conversation after the staffing guidelines and class sizes, because while I did like some of the changes that I saw, I was a little bit apprehensive about, I mentioned the principals having a safety net. I probably should have said supports, because I know I'm of the belief that we should, if we for some reason no longer have staff, that position is held to be able to do whatever might need to happen in that school. So seeing that change made me a little nervous, but I appreciated what Dr. Moran had to say about when you leave it up to choice, you do leave it up to chance, and having the walkthroughs, the will also help us to be able to see what's happening and working well in the schools. You said that you would be able to use that to help resource teachers to be able to better implement and do work in that way. So we are, guess what? So at this, sitting in this seat does not make me any less concerned about who's at the helm at MCPS. I always held you all in a high regard and thought you worked hard on behalf of our students, and I still think that. But as we make these changes, I know you're not unfamiliar with the term, you don't have to be sick to get better. And in looking at our data, we do know that there are definitely things that we can do and change to help our students. So talk about, so Dr. Addison, I heard you say, and I'm very much aware of the program evaluation process, but before you get to the program evaluation, or correct me, every time you're having a discussion, are you going to bring up the program evaluation with the school board? Because what I was going to say is, prior to getting to the program evaluation, would a mid-course correction look like in the event you see that things are not going according to plan and you hadn't gotten to the evaluation period? What would that look like? And I don't know if that you can answer or respond to that. But
I think it's important that, and didn't state it, but we don't wait to look at data for the program evaluation. There's ongoing continuous data monitoring that is happening across all offices and divisions to support the ongoing shifts that need to occur. And even when a program evaluation is occurring, there's a collaborative, it's a constant collaboration between shared accountability staff and the requesting office. So they're getting information, they're getting that feedback to understand. You're seeing the final product, right? But that internal sharing of data is still ongoing that supports what you just shared in terms of that mid-course correction that may need to take place.
Yep, and very much aware of progress monitoring is something that when I was on the board, we made certain that we were doing just so that parents and the community could see if there was a return on investment and what work was happening in between there. But thank you for lifting that up and pulling that out for the millions of viewers watching that may only be like 10.
When I say it's more of an aspirational and lifetime number, it may on YouTube, it may one day achieve, when millions of views. So I'm glad we have gotten to where we are now because this question I think will be more appropriate. A lot of what we talk about when addressing achievement and opportunity gaps is, and when we look at populations, when we broke out the data, we looked at where we are. A lot of it was tied towards a lot of interventions or dollars or programs are tied to farms rates, for example, or there's system-wide things that like are going to help everybody. Rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing, which is appropriate too. And as you said, like for instance, we got to get that right for all kids. But because these gaps have persisted for so long, and in some cases, are just so stark, particularly in the case of, I'm going to talk about right now for our Black students, for example. Are there, and this came up in the anti-racist audit, when we discussed that in January, a lot of the things are system-wide. So are there specific programs either in place or being thought about specifically for Black students, for example, that are culturally appropriate, that meet that are not system-wide or farms-based interventions, but that tie either programs, dollars, resources, specific interventions for those students to help them achieve? And I would say the same thing for, Latino students. That's something that has been on my mind. It's something that has been on mind of some community members, and I hope you understand how I'm asking the question. And if there aren't, is there a reason there aren't? And I would love your view on that.
We do have instances where there are community groups working with particular schools, sororities, fraternities that are doing some work with tutoring, mentoring, things of that nature for African American students.
Right. But that's not a funded MCPS.
It is not a funded, but those are partnerships that they work with us to get them going and things of that nature. But it is not a funded partnership. We are working with the NAACP. They have started a partnership with us and IXL, which is a math intervention. And we've shared that with Dr. Taylor, and
I heard that's been growing rapidly.
It has been growing, and so that is something that he's looking to put some money towards, so that we can provide more support to families as a supplement to families for math. So we hear many families say, "I don't know how to support my child with math," and so this could be an area. But we don't necessarily have a funded MCPS program specifically for African American students. We do try to encourage many of our schools to participate, like in our Saturday school programs and things of that nature, but nothing specifically that I can think of for African American.
And do you think that there should be?
I definitely think that when we look at our data and we look at who has the need, though typically are in many of our schools African American students, Latino students, and so reaching out to those students who have a specific academic need, yes, that is critical. And so figuring out how we fund and support that is something that we'll have to continue to look into.
Dr. Hamlet, do you have anything to say on that? I mean, I think, whether it's partnerships with culturally appropriate out-of-school time providers and or the work of addressing what's been identified in the climate surveys and the anti-racist audit, and or obviously bond or like getting more diverse teaching. You know, Dr. Taylor's been rightly lifting up that this is the first time in MCPS's history that the majority of MCPS staff are non-white. Obviously, if you do that with educate, that's heavily weighted with support staff. If you do, in educator staff, we're not anywhere close to that. But obviously, we know, for example, a very research-based intervention for black boys and black students is having a teacher that looks like them. There, if you have one, your grades, you know, you have this higher chance. If you have two in a row, you know, your chances of graduating and having higher achievement goes really high. So obviously that's a research-based strategy. So I just think I really want to push us to be thinking about this in our budgetary context, because community members ask, I think it's something, and again, I'm not just saying for our black students, for our Latinos, and because there's cultural appropriate, type of instruction. And I wrote down when you said this, you're not going to intervene your way out. However, there are, I think, some targeted supplemental for those populations that could be helpful when, they're not feeling connected to a classroom. They're not, because it kind of just overlays with the culture in the classroom, and we have to just stress it. So I kind of was filibustering to let you come up, but Dr. Hamlin.
No worries. I appreciate the opportunity to share on this. I actually was back there looking at the math data in particular. And so there are a number of things that my colleagues have shared that I think are super important. Certainly the stronger Tier 1 instruction with that instructional vision and framework that's clear across the district. I would say that is the greatest equity lever when it comes to instruction. But when I was looking at the math data, so for example, if black male math proficiency is currently at 23.8%, while white males are at 62% and Asian males are at 64%. Even if every group improves at the same rate, the gap stays the same, right? And so to close that gap, the rate for our Black and Latino has to significantly outpace those groups. So and that's why I think certainly strengthening the Tier 1 instruction is important. But I think it's really about reframing it from a student deficit standpoint to system responsibility, and we're chipping away at that. But to answer your question that you just asked, I do think it's important to have some specific programs that can target specific groups, whether it's racial groups and or that intersectionality with gender. Because yes, Tier 1 instruction is important. Yes, the evidence-based interventions are important. And we know how far that we have to go in order to close those gaps. The other thing that I think is important, and this is something that we have to shift toward, we a lot of times look at gaps, not just opportunity gaps or achievement gaps. We look at it as like how far Black students have to go in order to be commensurate with their white or Asian peers, right? Or the same thing for our Latino students. I like to look at the data from a gaps to proficiency standpoint. So when my colleagues were talking about MCAP data versus looking at, which is the lagging data, versus looking at some of our formative assessments and MAP and DIBELS and so forth, those are the things that we're really looking at to look at gaps to proficiency. So within student groups, how far do our Black male students have to go within their own student group to be considered proficient, not necessarily to chase.
As compared to others, yeah.
Correct, as compared to others. So I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but as it relates to how far we have to go to close those gaps, whether we're comparing to, other racial groups or if we're just chasing that proficiency mark within a student group, I do think it's important to not just have the good Tier 1 instruction and the sound instructional practices, but also having some targeted interventions and supports that are specifically for the groups that have to grow the furthest.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the candor, and I think if that's the answer is, I agree with you. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to like figure out what those things are. I mean, the fact that we're here and we're like, we don't have those, that's the work. It's kind of to my first question on the pace. There's no way we're going to catch up or meet the standard we set for ourselves. I like the reframing. It's not catching up to, it's what is proficiency? What is your, and not what are you compared to others? That's one way to look at it, but what is the proficiency? And I think we need to be honest with ourselves, the public, about what will that require? The IXL example, the NAACP is, I think, that's a micro-targeted example of something that could be in that bucket. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be MCPS providing all of the programmatic. It could be partnering with other organizations or enabling that in the community. And I think especially when you overlay it with the culture and climate and anti-racist stuff, where there's impediments to getting good first instruction, clearly in the data. Like there's no question that, for certain students, they feel, whether it's a language barrier or another cultural barrier. So I think it's even more important that we would have specifically targeted dollars programming to help meet that standard. So I'm hoping we can think about that and talk about it more as we go forward. Yep. Thank you, Councilmember Mink.
Thank you so much to both of you for driving that point home. That's exactly what we need is what are the interventions or changes or policies or all of the investments that we're making that are showing a faster gain in the groups that need to be having the opportunity to make those gains at a faster pace. And again, it is frustrating that the one where I remember that demonstrated so clearly are for positions that we don't have anymore. I recognize that the intent is to, or that the plan is to have the role that those full-time restorative justice positions that they were playing is to have that executed in a different way and through other investments. But we really need to be able to see in the data that is having that impact. So, I mean, as we're talking budget and as we're talking intervention, as we're talking all of these things, being able to show that here's the results that we're seeing, and that's why we're pouring more money into this, or here's the results that we're not getting, and so that's why we're not going to expand this, and being able to drill down and have that broken out by demographic groups, and have comparisons to defend that. We need that, or we're never going to get there. And it's not fair. It's not fair. It has to be backed by dollars. And I just want to, and I think that's the point that Chair Jawanda was making. And I just want to very strongly agree with that. Like, we have to have dollars that are correlating to the changes and the investments dollars that we are putting in order to close that opportunity gap and be able to see that in the results that we're getting.
Another example in the budget, just because we had the budget briefing, is the equity, the resources for like textbooks and stuff, like using the equity plus up or whatever it's called. I forget equity add-on. Yeah, okay. That's an example in real dollars. Like there's a baseline for everybody, but then for schools that need more, they're going to get more. And I think that's just another example of heading in that direction. But yeah, so I think we've done a lot today. So thank you for the information, and thank you for the work. And we'll be coming back to this obviously again. And if you could send us that presentation, as we said, that would be great. But with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.